Welcome into another episode of the PFF College Football Show. Max Chadwick alongside Dalton Wasserman here. We did the SEC preview already. Now it's time to preview every single Big Ten team heading into the 2025 season. Dalton, it is the biggest conference in America. 18 total teams. It's going to be a long show today, but I can't wait to break it all down.
The biggest conference, some of the biggest programs, some of the biggest names, some of the best players in the country. There's a lot of good teams out of the 18. You got 4 playoff teams out of this conference last year, and there's multiple teams even outside of that range from last year that are looking to break into it this year. So it's going to be a lot of fun to break down this conference, and I'm really curious to see who some of the dark horses are to challenge the traditional powers.
Absolutely. Yeah, the reigning national champion Ohio State is in this conference. You got a Final Four team in Penn State in this conference, a team that was the number one team in the country basically all year. And Oregon in this conference, it is a loaded conference. I wanted to remind you guys too, all of the stats that we break down here on this show are available to you guys with a PFF Plus subscription at subscribe.pff.com. You also get access to all the best fantasy tools on the planet, and of course access to all the player grades for the NFL as well as college football too. All right, Dalton, let's start off this Big Ten preview with the first school in alphabetical order. And you and I were joking beforehand, kind of crazy that the first school in alphabetical order in the biggest conference in America is an I school. But the Illinois Fighting Illini is our first school right here. One of the bigger surprises in college football last year, finishing 10-3 and number 16 in the final AP poll. That doubled their win total from the previous season, and it was their best final ranking in 23 years in the final AP poll. Not only that, it also matched the program record for most wins in a season as well. And the Fighting Illini brought back a lot of players from that 2024 squad. There are some question marks for the supporting cast around the quarterback and Luke Altmaier, but Dalton, they have a lot of continuity from an already great team.
I think that's the first thing that you look for when you're evaluating a team going into a new season is, okay, how much talent do they have returning from the previous team? And there's very few teams in the country with more than Illinois, right? Their starting quarterback is back. 2 of their top 3 running backs are back. The only question that we really have is at receiver, but almost their entire offensive line, almost their entire defense, the framework of the team last year that had their first 10-win season in a while and their first under Brett Bielema. Really, you look at this team and you talk about possibly a dark horse playoff contender just because they have so much talent. I have some questions in the passing game around Luke Altmaier, but when you look at the framework and the foundation of this team, especially on defense, there is a lot to work with this Illinois team.
Yeah, get this stat. So there were 27 players on Illinois last year that played at least 300 snaps. 18 of those 27 players are back in 2025. So a lot of continuity back for the Illinois Fighting Illini. I mentioned before, biggest question mark right now is kind of supporting cast for Luke Altmaier. He lost 2 star receivers in Pat Bryant and Sakari Franklin, both of them to the NFL. Their star running back, Josh McCray, transferred to Georgia this offseason too. And yes, they brought back basically the entirety of their offensive line, but they were only 82nd last year with a 64.9 team pass blocking grade. So you lose your star running back, your top 2 receivers, and your offensive line in terms of pass protection wasn't the best last year either. But Dalton, Luke Altmaier, I've heard a lot of hype around this guy going into the 2025 season. He had a pretty good year for the Fighting Illini last year. What did you see when you broke down his game?
He absolutely did. And what I saw the year before, actually in 2023, when he was up and down and he struggled, what he's always been is a good passer in a clean pocket, and they run a heavy RPO system now with Illinois that he has a lot of success in, but can you pass protect in front of him? Last year they did it a lot better than they did in 2023, and he responded with the 3rd best big-time throw rate in the Big Ten. So you're talking about a guy, when he's clean, he's a solid pocket passer. He's got decent mobility. He's a good enough athlete that if you want him to be an occasional threat on a read option, that's fine. But I really, that's what I look at, is he is one of the quarterbacks in the country who is most dependent on his pass protection. If he is protected, he's probably a top 30 to 35 starter in the nation. If he's not, then things really start to plummet. But that's what I see, the improvement in pass protection last year, and his ability to master a lot of the RPO concepts in Illinois' offense really made him an effective threat in most of their games last year. Really, I would say aside from maybe the Penn State game was the one game where they just couldn't pass protect at all, and really nobody could against Penn State and Abdul Carter last year. But that's what you're looking at, is right around a top 30 quarterback when he's left in a clean pocket consistently.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mentioned before, he lost his top 2 receivers to the NFL. He did bring in a really good receiver, though, and Hudson Clement transferring in from West Virginia. He was 5th among all Big 12 wide receivers last year with an 82.7 receiving grade over actually the last 2 years, Incredibly reliable hands. He's only dropped 3 of his 77 career catchable targets, and he's caught 63% of his contested targets too. I think he'll have a massive year as a redshirt junior this year. I really love the tape I watched at West Virginia, and now with the quarterback in Luke Altmaier, who might be a little bit of a better passer than he had in Garrett Green at West Virginia, Hudson Clement as a clear number 1 option for Illinois this year could have a big year.
Clement's a guy with really good size at 6'3" and about 205, 210, right? Who can make a lot of contested catches. And what you're looking at when you talk about the flaws of West Virginia's quarterbacks over the last couple of years is just a lack of accuracy. He's a guy that if you just put the ball somewhere within his catch radius, kind of like it was for even Zachary Franklin and Pat Bryant last year for Illinois, he's going to make those catches. He's going to make tough catches, especially over the middle of the field. So I'm expecting a big year from him, especially as the primary threat in all of those RPOs for Illinois.
Who is the star defensive player for the Fighting Illini next year?
Boy, you got a lot of options because it's a really good and aggressive defense. They bring a lot of 5-man rush. They play a lot of man coverage on the back end as much as any team, but their slot corner, Xavier Scott, is the star of the show. He's one of the best run-defending corners in college football. He's one of the best man-to-man corners in college football. Even late in the year, started to back up and play a little bit of safety for him, so he's got versatility. But when you look at the attitude and the production that Xavier Scott brings to their secondary, again, especially with the super high rate of man-to-man coverage that the Fighting Illini play, you're talking about a star player, a future NFL player in Xavier Scott, and maybe not the only one, especially in that secondary.
Yes, second among all corners over the last 2 years, the 91.9 run defense grade. That's crazy. He's a really, really good player. 6 picks over the last 2 years, too. Big fan of Xavier Scott's game. Dalton, their win total is set at 8.5 right now. What is the bottom line for Illinois? Will they go over or under 8.5? And I want to ask you, is this a sleeper to make the college football playoff a lot like Indiana was last year?
I think they're definitely a playoff sleeper. We're going to learn a lot about them in the first half of the season. They've got a pretty nice runway at the end in the second half, their last 5 games. When you look at within their first 7 games, they've got at Duke, at Indiana, home for USC, and home for Ohio State. I think those 4 games really determine the outcome of their season. If they can get to the second half of their season at 5-2 or maybe even 6-1, then I really think you're talking about a serious playoff threat. But the first half of their schedule stands in the way of that. I do think they're a playoff sleeper. 8.5 is probably a perfect number when you talk about, okay, out of those 4 games, if they lose all of them and win the rest, then they're 8-4. I'm going to take the over. They might float. I could see them floating in that 9-10 win range. They have so much experience coming back. I do have questions at wide receiver and where Illinois really faltered last year in big games that they lost. When you look at the Penn State game, even the Michigan game that they won, can they pass protect against the really good teams? They were able to functionally pass protect against the mid-level teams in the Big Ten. Can they pass protect against even against Duke and Manny Diaz and all those blitzes? Indiana with Mikhail Kamara, Ohio State, who's always got talent on the D-line. If they can pass protect enough, this is absolutely a playoff sleeper. I'll take the over. I think 9-10 wins is really within range.
That's a great call because, Manny Diaz has a blitz a lot, so that Duke is going to be a huge one on September 6th, their second game of the season. I'm taking the over on 8.5, though. I think this is at least a 9-3 football team going into next year, as long as last year really wasn't a fluke for Illinois, considering, before that they weren't very good. But they brought back basically everyone from last year's team, and they already went over that win total from last year too. I think Illinois is going to go over. I don't know if they're going to make the college football playoff, but they could absolutely be a sleeper. And, if we're talking about them as a contender to make the playoff, they're probably going to go over 8-4, right? So I think 9-3 at least is what I'm expecting for Illinois this year. I'm going to take the over for the Illinois Fighting Illini. The biggest Cinderella story in college football last year was, of course, our Indiana Hoosiers we're talking about right now. In Curt Cignetti's first year as the head coach, the Hoosiers won 11 games and made the college football playoff. That was 2 wins more than Indiana's previous program record. And the 3 years before Curt Cignetti took over as head coach, they were 9-27. So Indiana won 11 games last year. They won 9 games in the previous 3 years combined. So an incredible year for the Hoosiers last year. And Dalton, a lot like Illinois, they're pretty well positioned to make another run with so many star players returning.
Boatload of talent coming back for Indiana, and they did a great job in the transfer portal again. But I think for me, it starts especially with the talent returning on defense. You talk about star players, Mikhail Kamara, D'Angelo Ponce, Aiden Fisher at linebacker, Amari Farrell kind of playing that nickel safety role. They've got the foundation of last year's defense back, and I still think, even though they scored a boatload of points with Curtis Rourke in the backs and Elijah Surratt and everything they had going on offense, they were an explosive offense. I really think this defense got really underrated last year, especially with all the star talent that they have. So that's what I'm looking at. I think this defense, especially in all the returning talent, is the foundation of success for this team this year, and they just need some of the newer offensive pieces to gel in.
And I know they had a lighter schedule last year, but Indiana had the best defense in the country in terms of EPA per play. So they had the most efficient defense in America last year, the second most efficient offense in the country, too. Just really impressive all around.
Their run defense in particular was just outstanding. Yeah. I mean, even in the playoff game against Notre Dame, they gave up, obviously, the 198-yard touchdown to Jeremiah Love. But outside of that, they were even lights out in run defense against Notre Dame, against Ohio State. If you were going to beat this Indiana team, you really had to get over the top on them, and even that's not easy.
You mentioned before the star power. Indiana had 4 players that made the top 10 of my positional rankings. That's tied for 5th among all schools in the country. You mentioned Mikhail Kamara right there, D'Angelo Ponce, Elijah Surratt, top 5 receiver in the country for me, and Carter Smith, their left tackle, was a top 10 offensive tackle in the country in my book, too. The question is, and I know a lot of people are very high on this guy right now for the NFL draft, but can Fernando Mendoza reach the highs that Curtis Rourke did? Because let's face it, Curtis Rourke, maybe not as good of a prospect as Fernando Mendoza, but he was an excellent college quarterback last year. 90.2 passing grade Curtis Rourke had last year, was 4th in the country. The only 3 ahead of him, Jackson Dart, Cam Ward, and Shedeur Sanders. All 3 of them now playing on Sundays. Fernando Mendoza, like I said, has plenty of fans in draft circles. A lot of people think he could be the number 1 quarterback in the draft next year. But it's worth mentioning he did have more turnover-worthy plays than big-time throws while at Cal last year. But Dalton, tell me more about Fernando Mendoza and just what you expect from him in this offense.
Yeah, this is a conversation I'm excited to have because we really haven't done it yet. He wasn't in our top 10 quarterbacks as far as this college football season goes. But when you look at Mendoza, when he's clean in the pocket and he's decisive, which he's very decisive, he gets rid of the ball quickly. 84.6 passing grade last year on throws under 2.5 seconds. Okay, so when you're talking about that number, that's 10th best in the country. When he's clean and he sees that first read, he can rip it. He's got a good arm. He's not afraid of any throw. He's really kind of a gunslinger, and I think the positive for Mendoza is theoretically, I think he fits extremely well in this offense. His best throws go to the intermediate range of the field between 10 and 19 yards. That's where Curtis Rourke excelled last year. RPOs and play action, especially the RPO game, that's where Mendoza excels. That's where the Indiana offense excels. And when you talk about, again, actually, let me go back to the intermediate part because those two go together. Indiana had the 3rd best EPA per play on intermediate passes last year. So Mendoza, in theory, fits this offense really well. The 2 big things for me, 1, turnover-worthy plays, and 2, sacks, okay? And Cal did not have a great offensive line, but when you look at since week 6 of 2023, all right, that's when Mendoza became the starter at Cal. 4th most turnover-worthy plays in the country. 3rd most sacks taken in the country. Those 2 things are going to be the element that's going to make or break this Indiana team. Can the ball security be a little bit better? I know he's a gunslinger, but there's times also when he stares down his first read and tries to force it, right? He's not afraid of tight windows, but he's also a guy who needs to understand, okay, they're going to create guys open in this Indiana offense. Get it there when it needs to be. When it's too tight, live to play the next down, right? The other thing is the sacks. He's not going to create a whole lot outside the pocket. He's an okay athlete, but he's not really going to be that guy that goes out there all the time throwing off platform. And the one thing that would still concern me is we saw towards the end of last year, Michigan, Ohio State, Notre Dame, when Wink Martindale and Jim Knowles and Al Golden started blitzing this offensive line, that you started to see the serious problem. I think that would be the one thing I'm looking for Indiana in their early season, especially I think they're playing Illinois very early in the season.
September 20th, yeah.
That's a game. Illinois blitzes a lot. That's going to be the key for them is protecting against blitzes. They got a couple offensive linemen in the portal, and then Mendoza keeping his composure through that because you can't give the football away. If there's anything Indiana did fantastic also last year was ball security. They did not turn the ball over. It was very rare for them to do that. So Mendoza, look, he's got his strengths. He is good, but I need the turnover-worthy plays and I need the sack total to come down for this team to succeed this year.
Yeah, he had 12 big-time throws and 17 turnover-worthy plays last year. So anytime you have more turnover-worthy plays than big-time throws, that's a red flag for us here at PFF, and he had 5 more turnover-worthy plays. So I get it. I get the hype with him because I know the tools are there, but like I'm not there yet to call him a top 10 pick.
And I believe, if I remember right, 5 of those 12 big-time throws came in one game against Stanford. Yeah. So, again, he can move the chains, and there are times when he's the gunslinger in him really does help you, right? They were way out ahead of Miami, and their defense blew the Miami game, and he's a competitor, don't get me wrong. But there's certain times he's got to scale it back and just make the right throw and don't try to force it into those tight windows.
So, as you can see, Dalton and I are not on board with calling Fernando Mendoza a top 5 quarterback right now in college football, but we are on board with calling Elijah Surratt a top 5 wide receiver in college football right now. My number 4 receiver in the country. He was one of 13 former James Madison players that transferred over with Curt Cignetti to Indiana, and he was incredibly productive despite the jump up in competition level. Only Jeremiah Smith and Jordan Tyson had more receiving yards last year than Elijah Surratt among returning Power 4 receivers. He had 957 receiving yards last year. 16 contested catches were tied for the 7th most among all Power 4 receivers last year, too. Over the last 2 years, he's a 90.3 PFF grade that leads all returning FBS wideouts, and over 2,100 receiving yards over the last 2 years. Again, the most among returning FBS wideouts. Over 400 more, actually more than anyone else in the country. He's excellent at boxing out defenders with his 6'2" size. Very strong hands right now. A very underrated player, Dalton, and in my opinion, a top 5 receiver in the country.
Absolutely. And look, you got one underrated player there in Surratt that came over with Curt Cignetti from James Madison out there on the offense. I've got one on defense, several on defense, but D'Angelo Pons for me on defense is the star outside at corner. Only 5'9" and 170 pounds, super undersized. Don't even care. He may be the most technically sound corner in the country, and this Indiana team runs as much zone defense as anybody in the country, and the reason for that is that Pons has such good eyes and good reactions to what he's seeing out there on the field in zone coverage, and he's not afraid of anybody, not even his high school teammate Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State. D'Angelo Pons in this secondary, he's what makes it go. He is lights out on his side of the field. He's a master of these zone coverages that Indiana plays, and again, a core piece of a defense that is going to be the foundation of their success this year.
Yeah, 91.8 grade over his first 2 years of college football is the best among all returning cornerbacks in the country. So yes, the size isn't the best for D'Angelo Pons, but he's got that dog in him, man. I love D'Angelo Pons and watching his game, and usually that kind of size lends you to playing in the slot. He's one of the best outside corners we have in college football. And he went to high school with Jeremiah Smith, right?
Yes.
So he was battle-tested in high school and practiced every day. That's why he immediately came into college and was so good immediately at James Madison and then at Indiana this past year, too. Dalton, a lot like Illinois, the win total is set at 8.5 for the Indiana Hoosiers right now. Will it be a little bit of a hangover for Indiana after making the playoff last year, or will it just business as usual for Curt Cignetti?
I think this is a darn good football team, and I think you just look at here a handful of 50-50 games. I look at some big games for them: Illinois, Iowa, Oregon, Penn State. But I look at the rest of these teams on their schedule, and I really think they're the better team in 7, if not 8 of them. I'm going to take the over in a similar fashion as Illinois. This team has a lot of returning talent coming back. Mendoza's obviously the X factor as the new quarterback coming in, but I think 9 wins again is very attainable. Whether they make the playoff or not might depend on the at-large and maybe more arguments this year about strength of schedule, especially out of conference. But I think this team is fully capable of winning at least 9 games. Again, they have a great defense with most of the big-time pieces coming back, right? And I think if Mendoza can keep that, because the other thing we didn't talk about too, other than Surratt, a lot of their skill talent coming back around Surratt as well. Omar Cooper, their second leading receiver, is back, and I really like this running back room that they've built with Roman Hemby and Lee Beebe transferring in from UAB, and Kalen Black, who's back from last year. They've got 3 solid backs they can rely on who are all really physical. I think this team's loaded with talent. I think at least 9 wins should be the expectation.
I'm with you. I'm taking the over on Indiana, too. I think this is another potential playoff team, which is crazy considering a program like Indiana has kind of been down in the dumps for a long time and could have back-to-back college football playoff appearances. I think it's certainly possible next year. Now, it might take a win over Oregon or Penn State for that to happen, but I think at least 9-3 should be expected for Indiana, which if that's the minimum for Indiana at this point right now, that's an incredible job for Curt Cignetti. I think right now he's a top 10 coach in the country. I should put up my rankings for the top 10 coaches in college football. I had Curt Cignetti number 10 on that list because it's just what he did at James Madison and then what he did at Indiana. So impressed by him, and they're just humming along right now. And just how he utilized the transfer portal is outstanding. That's how you build a program, rebuild it overnight, is the transfer portal. I don't think anyone in the country is better at doing that than him right now. So I like Indiana to go over 8.5 and maybe not make the playoff once again, but they're certainly going to be in contention. I think right now it's a top 20 team in college football.
Playoff or not, that team is absolutely not a fluke.
No,
absolutely
definitely not. There's a lot of players returning too, like Illinois. That should be a really good team. Got our boy Donnie in the chat right now, congratulating us on the 20,000. We want to thank you guys too. We actually just hit 20,000 subscribers very recently on this channel. That obviously could not have been done without all you guys, and cannot wait for the 2025 season with all you guys. It's gonna be a heck of a season this year. With Donnie saying that, let's give Donnie his preview of his school right now. The Iowa Hawkeyes up next in our preview. Iowa, pretty predictable program, honestly, under Kirk Ferentz. Aside from the COVID-shortened 2020 season where they went 6-2, so still a really good year for Iowa. Iowa has won at least 8 games in every year since 2015, thanks to their stellar defenses. However, they have not really turned into a true college football playoff contender because the offenses have lagged behind right now. In fact, the Hawkeyes have been outside the top 100 of offensive EPA per play in each of the last 4 years, but they've also been in the top 20 of defensive EPA per play in each of those 4 years as well. Now they're hoping a transfer at quarterback and Mark Gronowski, we'll talk about in a little bit, can help out that offense, kind of become more at least average this year. He won 2 FCS national championships at South Dakota State and won the Walter Payton Award in 2023, which is basically the FCS version of the Heisman Trophy. He'll have an elite offensive line blocking for him, but the Hawkeyes will have plenty of questions pretty much everywhere else on offense. But Dawn, what is the biggest strength of the Hawkeyes right now?
I think you think of Iowa and you think of physical football on both sides of the ball, and that starts on the offensive and defensive lines. They've got your number 6 offensive line in the country, led by Logan Jones and Jennings Dunker. They're the center and the right tackle. And then you got Aaron Graves and a really good defensive line, top 15 to 20 in the country as well, especially in run defense. It's a really good football team. They want to run and stop the run. It's the same old story with the Hawkeyes, and it starts in the trenches. I think especially with their offensive line, and I really like the adjustment that they made with Tim Lester coming in as the offensive coordinator last year, putting in more of an outside zone scheme, trying to get to the edge and allow their backs to make one cut and get explosive runs going. So you really look at Iowa and you go, okay, we're in for a dogfight in the trenches every single week, no matter who's playing them.
Again, Iowa's maybe the most predictable program in the country. We could write this preview basically every year and say trenches, biggest strength. It's always been trenches for Iowa. They're always good at offensive line, especially offensive line and defensive line too. And yeah, number 6 O-line for me in the country. And if we did a top 15 for defensive lines, they would have been in that top 15 too. They have a really good defensive line coming back next year. Biggest question mark, as it always is for Iowa, where will the offense come from? Because aside from the offensive line, which last year was one of the best offensive lines in college football, really the only source of offense for them was running back Caleb Johnson, who was, of course, taken by the Pittsburgh Steelers in the NFL draft. So now they're hoping that a transfer at quarterback and Mark Gronowski can help them out on offense. They had the second worst offense in the Power 4 last year in terms of EPA per pass, but last year, he had a 76.8 passing grade at the FCS level. So there are some question marks with him as a quarterback, and of course in that receiving core too, and of course who's going to replace the production left behind by Caleb Johnson. But Dalton, let's talk more about their new quarterback and Mark Gronowski, who, like I said, 2-time FCS national champion, a Walter Payton Award winner too. What should we expect from him moving up to the FBS level now?
So I think he's a lot of what Iowa and Kirk Ferentz and Tim Lester are looking for. There's a couple of things here. Down at South Dakota State, one, he's a winner. He won 2 FCS national championships down there, and in 2023 won the Walter Payton Award as effectively the FCS Heisman Trophy, right? Yep. So you're talking about a guy who's a pocket passer who comes from a run-heavy offense, 6'3", 220 pounds. Over the last 4 years, he was the 4th highest graded quarterback in the FCS and had the 3rd best turnover-worthy play rate in the last 3 years, I should say, with a 1.7% turnover-worthy play rate. I think what Iowa's going to like about him is that he doesn't beat himself. He doesn't always make spectacular rocket arm throws. I'd say he's got an average to maybe above average arm. He's got solid mobility, 400 rushing yards in each of his 4 seasons as the Jackrabbit starter. So a guy who gives you a little bit of everything, but most importantly, does not beat himself, right? Doesn't create the most explosive plays all the time. I think the biggest thing for me is that how much does he raise the ceiling on this offense? His deep ball sometimes kind of flutters. He's got around a 50-yard ceiling on that, so I don't think they're going to be getting too vertical too often, except if they're trying to get down the seams and play action right in that 20 to 30-yard range. And the other thing too is not a whole lot of games, and obviously at top end FCS football is really good, but only 2 games against FBS opponents. Ironically, one was Iowa and the other was Oklahoma State this past year. In those 2 games had a 40.5 passing grade. So it's really a question of, look, He's solid. We know what he is as an elite FCS quarterback. Can he come up against Big Ten defenses? And obviously with going to be a little bit less separation than he used to have with some of those receivers at South Dakota State down on that level, can he find a way to make tight window throws and make it and create explosive plays? Or is this once again going to be a 5 yards at a time passing game?
Yeah, absolutely. Brandon Howell in the chat is asking, does Iowa have another prospect at tight end again right now? I don't think they have one that's really noteworthy for the NFL draft just yet. Maybe someone will break out. I know Addison Strenga, they're really excited about in that program right now too. The senior tight end for them. Not really right now at tight end, but the offensive line is loaded. And we could have gone with either of their star offensive linemen in Jennings Dunker or Logan Jones. We're going to highlight Logan Jones here right now, though, as one of the best centers in college football. In fact, he was the highest graded center in the Power 4 last year with an 83.6 PFF grade. Really dominant in the run game. He led all Power 4 centers with an 82.3 run blocking grade. And despite only weighing 293 pounds, he's a powerful player who gets the second level with ease at that size. And also, pretty good pass blocker too, placing 10th among all Power 4 centers with a 1.8% pressure rate allowed last year. He's my number 4 returning interior offensive lineman in college football. He's an outstanding player. Could have declared for the draft last year and been one of the top centers in the draft, but instead returns to Iowa as one of the best centers in the country.
Absolutely, and I think a player you mentioned listed at only 293 who really benefited from the system switch again to Tim Lester. This whole offensive line, Jones and Dunker, all these guys really good in that outside zone scheme. So I think he's allowed now to use his athleticism to his advantage, and that's why that run blocking grade is so good.
So we know they also have a great defensive tackle on that D line too. We're spotlighting here.
I know we get down and dirty here with Iowa, don't we, with the offensive and defensive lines? But on the inside, they've got a really good pass rusher in Aaron Graves, 12 sacks and an 82.3 pass rush grade over the last 2 seasons. Those are both the best marks among returning defensive tackles since the start of 2023. So you're talking about a guy who was a former wrestler. He's got pretty good twitch. He's got really good hand usage. I think even in the run game, when it comes to getting off blocks, he uses a combination of strength and athleticism that not a lot of other defensive tackles in the country have. Aaron Graves, he's very workmanlike. He's rugged. He's kind of just the classic Iowa defensive lineman, right? But when you talk about this team creating a pass rush, especially when they're only sending 4, Aaron Graves on the inside is the guy to watch.
So, Dalton, their win total is set at 7.5 right now. You're taking the over or under, and what's the bottom line for the Iowa Hawkeyes?
When's the last time they were under that?
It feels low.
Well, I guess they went 7-5 in the regular season last year.
So yeah, it would have.
So I guess it would have been under that last year. But I mean, their offense was, other than Johnson. This is the question I think really is when you're talking about this number. Is Gronowski the answer? And do they just, as always, I mean, we ask this question do they have enough on offense? Do they have enough? Because they're going to win. They're going to win at least. They're going to make a bowl game on their defense alone. But
they actually won 8 games in the regular season last year.
They lost the bowl game to Missouri. That's right. Okay, so they won. Okay, so we'd have to check on the last time they were under 8 in the regular season. But there's going to be a handful of games they win just with their defense. But again, you're talking about other good defensive teams they're playing though. Iowa State, Rutgers, Indiana, Wisconsin, Penn State, Oregon. I mean, there's Nebraska even. There's a lot of teams here where you go, Iowa's playing all these 50-50 tight games all the time. And I think the other big question is who can replace Caleb Johnson.
2022, they were 7-5 in the regular season, and they won the bowl game. So that would have gone under in 2022.
This is a tougher schedule than I thought it was, too.
It's 25th in the country, according to Power Rankings. So,
do they have? And a lot of their tougher games are at home.
I mean, they're pretty much always winning 8 games. I'm going to go over. I'm taking the over on this team.
You feel like you have to take the over because 8-4 just feels like it's normal.
They're
for
so
them.
Consistent. This is a weird, and I get it because Caleb Johnson's gone. But like, if Mark Gronowski comes in and is as good as he was in the FCS level, I mean, this team can win 9 or maybe even 10 games next year. Maybe be a dark horse playoff contender. But if not, they might struggle. But even if he doesn't play as well as he did the FCS level, I still think 8-4 is certainly possible.
I mean, legitimately, anything is better than they've had at quarterback the last 2 years. Anything. I mean, they were hoping Cade McNamara would be healthy and effective. That never really worked. I mean, it's been the worst quarterback room in the country over the last 2 years. That's what it's been. So if Gronowski, even if he's not great in a 90 like he was at the FCS, if he comes in and he gives you a mid to high 70s, something effective, then you've got a good team, and they're always going to be good on defense with Phil Parker running the show. So I think I'm with you. I'll take the over 7.5. There's some 50-50 games that could cost them there, but they find ways to win ball games, and they find ways to do it their way.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. There's like 3 games that we're definitely not going to be favored in. It's the Penn State game. They host Penn State. They host Indiana. I don't think they'll probably be favored in that one either. And then they host Oregon. Actually, ironically, host all their 3 of the hardest games.
Yeah.
But yeah, other than that, I mean, I think they could be favored in almost every other game. So I'm going to go over for Iowa too. I could see hitting under too, but yeah, I'm going over. It's kind of 3 for 3 on overs right now. I might have to find some unders pick here, Dalton, pretty soon. But next up for us in this Big Ten preview is the Maryland Terrapins, who had 6 straight losing seasons, and then after that, they had a nice 3-year stretch under Mike Locksley, 3 straight winning seasons from 2021 to 2023, with 3 bowl victories in those 3 years as well. Came crashing back down to earth this past year, though, with a 4-8 record. Both the offense and the defense shared the blame, as they were outside the top 90 in PFF grading, both on offense and defense last year. 2025 outlook doesn't really appear to be too much better. Only 3 of their 15 most valuable players from last year's team are back, according to PFF's wins above average metric. At least some optimism, though, Dawn, because they brought in one of the top 15 quarterback recruits in the country in Malik Washington, who we'll talk about in a little bit.
Yeah, I think the story of this Maryland, this kind of era of Maryland football we're in right now, is Mike Locksley's obviously doing a great job recruiting, and Malik Washington, they're hoping, is the future. He was the number 11 quarterback recruit in this class. He might be one of the very few true freshman quarterbacks that we see starting. I don't know if he's necessarily the favorite right now, but he's deep in the competition, especially with UCLA transfer Justin Martin, and I thought Washington looked really good in his spring game, but I think what this team is trying to find is just that transition from the era of Taulia Tagovailoa, who's the all-time the Big Ten's all-time leading passer. That's why they had a couple of those nice years, right? Last year, Tagovailoa graduates. They have Billy Edwards Jr. starting. He gets injured midway through the year trying to play through it, and they struggled. But I think that's the hope, is you have Malik Washington at quarterback as one of the top recruits in the country, that he's the ray of hope that you look for. And if he starts in his true freshman year, that suddenly becomes the most interesting part of this Maryland team.
You mentioned the number 11 quarterback in the country, and also the highest rated overall recruit Maryland's brought in 4 years for that program. And you mentioned the spring game, 12 for 18 in the spring game, 168 yards and 2 touchdowns. So yes, I know it's only a spring game. It's really all we got to go off of him right now. He's a very, very talented kid, and is the future of the program. Also might be the present of the program too, because he might start week 1 as a true freshman. But the question is, like you see right there, can they support him properly? Because they've had significant problems with their supporting cast on offense. In fact, they had the lowest graded offensive line in the Power 4 last year with a 47.1 offensive line grade in 2024, and they lost 3 starters from that unit too. They also will be without their top running back from last year, and their top 3 pass catchers, including 2 of them who were drafted in Ty Felton and Caden Prather. So Roman Hemby's gone, who mentioned before is at Indiana now. Then you look at what else, Ty Felton and Caden Prather are gone too. The lowest graded offensive line in the Power 4 that has 3 new starters on it too. A lot of question marks in that supporting cast offensively. But Dawn, when you watch Malik Washington, who of course you can only watch really his huddle tape from high school and the spring game, what did you see from him as he may be the starting quarterback as a true freshman?
I think 2 things stand out that you want to see, especially in a guy's first spring game that I saw. You mentioned 12 completing 12 for 18, but I think the 2 things that stick out for me are poise and accuracy, right? Poise in the pocket to stand in there long enough to make throws even to your second and third read. And then the accuracy I thought was impressive in that game, despite working with also a very young group of pass catchers, right? So I think there is hope for Washington. And honestly, the theme for this team is going to be that youth and how they develop together. It's kind of the reason that I might consider starting Washington week 1, because you've got a runway up front of FAU, Northern Illinois, and Towson. You have 3 games there where even if you don't necessarily win all 3, because who knows what FAU will be with their new head coach, in Northern Illinois, we saw them beat Notre Dame last year. We know they're always a good program, but I think you let Washington get in there and just get his feet wet and get the reps. But my favorite thing that I saw out of him was just not letting the moment get too big for him. And it might seem odd because you go, it's a spring game, not a whole lot of people there. It's a young team. It's another glorified practice. But for a true freshman kid in his first spring game, that's a lot. And I think he can handle the pressure of the starting quarterback job. It may get tough later in the year with tougher opponents and where Maryland's team is at right now, but I think he is the guy, and I really would heavily consider starting him right away.
Yeah, absolutely. He should have a really good tight end, too, to throw to in Dorian Fleming, who transfers in from Georgia State. He was among the top 15 tight ends in America last year in receiving touchdowns, with 6 of them, with 313 yards after the catch and 11 broken tackles after the catch, too. 566 total receiving yards, is 16th among all tight ends last year, too. Excellent athlete for the position, placing above the 96th percentile in our game athleticism score metric. So really good player. You saw him in even the spring game that Malik Washington was looking to him early and often in that spring game too. Dorian Fleming could have a big year as Maryland's maybe number one weapon.
I think throws up the seam to Fleming are going to be a lot of fun. He can really run too. When he gets out in the open field and he opens that stride up, Fleming can really run and create explosive plays after the catch. So I think there is an idea here. I think for me, especially with Washington making throws down the seams and over the middle of the field, he can do that. I think that's the best part of what he showed in his spring game, and Fleming's going to be a big beneficiary of that.
Who's the top defensive player for Maryland right now?
Look, I think you're trying to prevent explosive plays when you got a team like this, and I think you look to a safety like Jalen Husky, who can do a little bit of everything, right? 135 snaps at least last year at free safety and in the box and in the slot. He's kind of that do-it-all guy on the back end. Solid run defense grade around a 73, 3 interceptions last year. I think you just look at an all-around solid football player who can do a little bit of everything for him. So, there's some questions in the trenches as far as on both sides, O-line and D-line, what Maryland can do, but I think basing your secondary around a versatile player like Husky is a darn good idea.
Yeah, really, really solid player for them in that secondary. Probably their best unit overall is their secondary right now, too. All right, Dawn, the win total set at 4.5 for the Maryland Terrapins right now. So basically, will they be as bad as last year with maybe a true freshman at quarterback, or will it be a step forward for Mike Locksley?
This team is just so young. Yeah. I mean, that's what you look at, and trying to get to 5 wins. I mean, look, they could win their first 3 games. Again, FAU, Northern Illinois, Towson. We'll see where that goes. If they start 3-0, they got a lot better chance. My problem is then I dig in on their 9 Big Ten games, and I don't know if there's a single game where they're a favorite. And even I think maybe the weakest team they're playing might be either UCLA or Michigan State, but it's at UCLA, and those cross-country trips are tough. And Michigan State beat them last year. So I think when you're looking at this, it's just hard to find a ton of wins for a team this young. I think this is more about rebuilding and developing. I'm going to take the under on that. They might get off to a good start, but this is such a young football team on both sides of the ball that they need time to develop. I think it's very much where Michigan State was like last year and Jonathan Smith's first year, and they're just so young, and they just need to get out there and get reps.
Especially with a true freshman maybe starting at quarterback, and I know he's a very talented kid, the number 11 quarterback coming out of high school. It seems like they're at least a year away from really competing again in the Big Ten, so I'm also going the under right now. It's kind of a lackluster roster around him too. I'm just kind of worried about the supporting cast and offense, and the defense doesn't really have too many stars just yet either. But listen, I'm going under on Maryland, but I do like the future for this program. He's got Malik Washington and Dalton. I don't know if you've seen this. They have the number 1 overall recruit in the country for 2026 committed to them right now in Zion Ely. He's an edge defender. Right now, the number 1 player in the country. I believe they updated the rankings literally today, actually. He's now the number 1 player in the country. So Mike Locksley has the number 1 overall recruit right now committed to Maryland for next year.
He's recruiting his butt off. There's no question, but I think that's why they should try to play. And there's other programs who do this, right? Obviously, guys take, teams like Clemson and Iowa State and other teams that are really emphasizing player retention. Even at Texas, they're starting to do this now about retaining and keeping that chemistry between your players. If Locksley can bring that type of talent in and then develop it over multiple years, I think down the line, then we start to talk about Maryland as a dangerous team. I just think they're really, really young this year, and he's focusing on the right things when it comes to the recruiting.
Listen, the future, man, you got one of the highest rated quarterbacks ever to go to Maryland, and also maybe the highest rated overall player to ever go to Maryland in Zion Ely coming in 2026 too. So that wraps up our Maryland preview for 2025, though. Another school who's probably starting a true freshman at quarterback is up next in the Michigan Wolverines. They won a national title, obviously, in 2023 under Jim Harbaugh. And a little bit of a hangover this past year without him as the head coach. They lost 5 games under Sharon Moore last year. They only lost 3 games in the previous 3 seasons combined. Michigan still had some memorable moments, though, right? They beat Ohio State for a 4th year in a row. They beat Alabama in the bowl game, even though Michigan was down a lot of players in that game, and Alabama was basically at full strength in that game, too. So still some great memories from the 2024 season for Michigan. Just not as good as the previous 3 years were for the Wolverines. The defense was still elite. They were 5th in PFF grade as a unit, but Michigan was a disaster offensively. 3 different quarterbacks started for the Wolverines last year, and they were the 4th worst team in terms of EPA per pass in the Power 4. Still a lot of concerns offensively, but Michigan did bring in the number 1 overall player in the country in the 2025 high school class, and quarterback Bryce Underwood, flipping him from LSU, keeping him in state, keeping him home in Michigan. He's the chosen one for the Wolverines. And Dalton, he's already on the cover of EA College Football 26, even though he has not even played a snap yet. A lot of hype right now for Bryce Underwood. Maybe the most hype we've seen, or some of the most hype we've ever seen for a quarterback coming in from high school. But tell me more about their biggest strength is actually the other side of the ball.
Look, on the other side, their defense is going to be really good. Wink Martindale is going to have a really good unit. And look, they lost 2 first-round picks on their defensive line and another draft pick, one in Josiah Stewart, and then the 2 first-rounders, Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. But they're still going to have a really good defensive line when you look at Derek Moore off the edge, TJ Guy, Rayshawn Benny inside, even Clemson transfer Trey Williams. This defensive line was the number one reason they won ball games last year. It was the biggest reason they beat Ohio State. It was the biggest reason they beat Alabama, their ability to control the game. We'll see if this may be a slight drop-off with especially inside Graham and Grant leaving, but still an extremely talented unit. I even think somebody like Jayshon Barham can play off the edge a little bit and help him there as opposed to at linebacker. He's probably going to do a little bit of both, but the talent base that you have on this defensive line and then obviously the creativity from Wink Martindale that comes with it, that's what's going to keep Michigan in games just like it did last year.
The highest graded defensive line in 2022 and the highest graded defensive line in 2023 and 2024. So the highest graded D-line in each of the last 2 years, still my number 6 D-line heading into 2025 with guys like Derek Moore and Rayshawn Benny and even TJ Guy, really good player too, coming back to that defensive line. The weakness is, they got the quarterback, theoretically, and Bryce Underwood coming in, but the supporting cast for him still isn't great offensively. Michigan was last year 102nd in receiving grade last year, and they just lost Colston Loveland, who was picked 10th overall by the Chicago Bears in the 2025 NFL Draft. Michigan was also 99th in offensive line grade, and they lost 2 starters from that unit too. So the offensive line and that receiving core weren't very good last year. Now you take away a first-round top 10 pick at tight end too. I'm a little worried about the supporting cast from Michigan right now. But Dalton, tell me more about what should be the savior of Michigan football, Bryce Underwood, one of the highest-rated quarterbacks to ever come out of high school. What should we expect from him in his first year in the Maize and Blue?
You're looking at a guy who it really is built like if you were going to build a quarterback in the lab, this is what you would want. Listed at 6'4" and 208, but he recently said in an interview that Michigan has him up to 230 pounds, which is just ridiculous to have a freshman quarterback at 6'4" and 230. He says he feels like he's getting even more explosive as an athlete, and the arm talent's apparent. Look, he's got a cannon for an arm, and there's not a whole lot of wind-up to it. It's a quick, compact delivery that can rifle passes downfield. I thought he looked composed in the spring game, especially in the quick game in the more efficient throws closer to the line of scrimmage and working the chains. I think that's going to be a big thing for him. We saw it from a guy like DJ Lagway last year, trying to hit a lot of home runs and then a little bit inefficient underneath. I think Underwood can be efficient on those underneath throws. The supporting cast is a big question. I thought there were some nerves in the spring game a little bit when he threw the ball downfield. There was a few passes that sailed high, still working on the downfield accuracy, and he needs his receivers to separate a little bit better. But honestly, when you look at how he's built and what he has shown so far, you can see why he was the number 1 recruit in the country. The arm, it's easy arm talent. In the same way that we've talked about DJ Lagway over the past year, the ball just explodes out of his hand. He can make any throw on the field.
Yeah, he's a really good runner, too, in high school. So that's another thing to add to that offense, too. Another guy who should be a really good runner in that offense is Justice Haynes, who should take some of the pressure off of Bryce Underwood's shoulders. He was the number 2 running back for Alabama last year. He'll now really be the bell cow back probably for Michigan this year. Still was really impressive last year, even as kind of a backup for the Crimson Tide. He averaged 5.6 yards per carry, which were 6th among all SEC running backs with at least 75 attempts last year. And he had a really good 80.7 rushing grade as well. Very light on his feet. Has great jump cuts at 205 pounds. And like I said, could be a breakout star as the top guy in that Michigan backfield going into next year. But Dalton, like I said before, they have a great defensive line at Michigan, but also a guy that I'm sure a lot of Michigan fans are very excited to get back in Rod Moore.
And I'm excited to see him back, too. The free safety who really, I think this year is going to be the glue that holds the secondary together. He missed last year because he tore his ACL in the spring, but the 2 previous years per PFF's wins above average metric, he was the second most valuable safety in college football. 6 interceptions over those 2 years. Big part of their national championship winning team in 2023. Just to see him back on the field, because I think Michigan last year. You could see it with him out and with Keon Sabb transferring to Alabama. Then a little more of a struggle covering over the middle of the field. On the outside, they were still great with Will Johnson and Jair Hill, those corners that they always have going there at Michigan, but struggled over the middle. I think Rod Moore is going to be a big piece of fixing that problem. He's got great recovery speed. He's got good eyes back there, and as long as he can run like he used to before the torn ACL, I think Wink Martindale's going to have a lot of fun playing a lot of single high with Rod Moore back at free safety.
Yeah, I'm so happy to see him back at Michigan, too. It was a great, great player for the Wolverines. All right, Dalton, bottom line time now. Win total is set at 9.5 for Michigan. Vegas thinks it'll be a big bounce back year for the Wolverines. So basically, if they go over, that might be a college football playoff team at 10-2 right there. What do you think for the Michigan Wolverines? Are you taking the over/under, and what's the bottom line for Michigan?
Well, let's state that fact first. If this team goes 10-2, I would bet they're probably going to make the college football playoff. I think so that's been proven. If you're in the Big Ten, and even if those two losses are to, say, Oklahoma and Ohio State, which I know that's blasphemous because they haven't lost to Ohio State lately. But no, if this team goes 10-2, they're going to put them in the college football playoff. Yeah. And that means that Bryce Underwood most likely will have played well enough at quarterback to drive them to 10 wins on offense. But I'm going to take the under 9.5 there. I think, look, you're talking about a weird quarterback situation. We're talking about Underwood a lot, but he hasn't officially been named the Week 1 starter. It's just kind of expected with the recruiting hype and the money and all that. But they did bring in Mikey Keene, a veteran from Fresno State.
Solid player, yeah.
Solid player, but you're also not a very high ceiling. And the question is, can either of these quarterbacks, most likely Underwood, can they elevate a supporting cast that, for them, honestly, offensively is subpar? Haynes is solid, but in low volume at Alabama. I don't really know what they have at receiver. I mean, they have Samaj Morgan coming back. They brought in Anthony Simpson from UMass, who was a solid player there, but it's a big step up, right?
The O-line I'm worried about too, man.
The O-line that didn't have a single starter last year, grade above a 70, and doesn't look a whole lot better this year. I think the supporting cast is the part that worries me the most, not so much. And then, even then, I know it's Bryce Underwood. I know he's top recruit in the country. He's still a true freshman, Max. Yep. And we're going to find out a lot in week 2 when they have to go to Oklahoma and play Brent Venables and that great defense and a lot of good defenses throughout the Big Ten. I'm not taking this team as a 10-win team. I think maybe one more year to build this supporting cast around Underwood.
I'm taking the under, too. And listen, the O-line did bring in a couple really highly rated recruits. One of them was a 5-star, and Andrew Babalola. Could be a backup right tackle for them this year. And Ty Haywood, too, is a top 50 overall recruit, too. So they have that to look forward to in the future, but I'm taking the under on 9.5 too. I think expectations should be tempered for Bryce Underwood. I get it. He's got so much talent, but Dalton, we've seen time and time again, you need a supporting cast around a quarterback. And I'm worried about the supporting cast still for Michigan right now with that receiving core, with that offensive line. Justice Haynes, I like at running back, but he's not like a superstar at running back either. There's a lot of questions still on offense. Listen, they fixed the biggest problem with the offense last year, or hopefully should fix it, by getting Bryce Underwood in. But everywhere else, I still have big questions about it. So I like the defense. I love Bryce Underwood's potential. But a true freshman quarterback with that kind of supporting cast around him, I don't think that'll be a playoff team.
They ranked 101st in the country in offensive PFF grade last year. And they lost their three leading rushers and Colston Loveland at tight end, who was basically their entire. I think he accounted for somewhere near half their receiving yards. Yeah. So look, Underwood's not going to go in there and throw for 5,000 yards with this team. No. It's not going to happen. You just hope. What you hope for, and it's ironic because his first big game starting will be against this team, but you would hope that what happened to Jackson Arnold at Oklahoma does not happen here at Michigan with Underwood, because there's way, way too much at stake with Underwood carrying this team into the future and everything they spent to get him. Way too much at stake. They have to find a way this year to develop talent internally to support him. And then next year, I do wonder if maybe next offseason they hit the portal pretty hard for a supporting cast.
They should.
Because you can't let a talent like this go to waste.
They need to hit the portal hard for receivers is what they need to do. Yeah. So I think that's what they really should do. I think, again, temper the expectations a little bit. I'm excited to watch Bryce Underwood, of course, but just temper it a little bit. I get it. He's on the cover of EA College Football 26. I get it. He's one of the highest rated quarterbacks ever. I get it. You're hoping that he has like a Trevor Lawrence type of impact too, or Lawrence won a national title in his freshman year, but Lawrence also had a super team around him at Clemson that year too. Don't think it's the case for Michigan this year. So I think it'll be improved at quarterback from what they had last year. Don't think it'll be enough to make the college football playoff, though, in 2025. All right, another school we're talking about here is the Michigan State Spartans. And Jonathan Smith was in his first year as head coach last year. Had only a 5-7 record, though, which is Michigan State's third straight losing season. They have a 14-22 record now over the last 3 years, their worst 3-year stretch since 1980 to 1982. Both the offense and the defense were really to blame last year. They were each 100th or worse in PFF grade last season. There is some optimism, though, for the offense because Aiden Childs is back for another year at quarterback, and they also have a very solid receiving core, too. Defense has a lot more question marks right now, but Dalton, that passing game for Michigan State has a lot of intriguing stuff.
Yeah, I think when you look at building a team, and this was the idea when Jonathan Smith came over from Oregon State, that when he brought Aiden Childs over with him, is basically he went, okay, we have to build this thing around my quarterback, around my former four-star recruit quarterback. And when you look at what he has around him, he brought Jack Velling over from him at tight end from Oregon State with himself and with Childs. You've got Nick Marsh out there, who's a really interesting prospect at receiver. Krishan McCray, Amari Kelly coming in from the group of 5 level as wide receivers. This passing game gets really intriguing now with the depth of weapons that they have. And look, Jonathan Smith is always going to find ways to run the ball. He did it at Oregon State. Childs himself is a really dynamic runner. We'll talk about that. But I think when you really look at the potential and the upside of this Michigan State team, it's what Aiden Childs is going to be able to do with these weapons if he continues to develop as a passer.
Absolutely. You have a top 10 tight end in the country. You have 2 really good transfers, Amari Kelly and Krishan McCray. And then Nick Marsh was 5th among all true freshman receivers last year with 649 receiving yards. And, of course, last year was the year of the true freshman receiver, too. So the fact that he was top 5 in receiving yards among true freshmen in that year is really impressive. I'm excited to see what he could do as a true sophomore. Biggest weakness, though, is the opposite side, really, the pass defense for Michigan State right now. Really, last year, they were the 5th worst defense in the Power 4 in terms of EP per pass. They had the 4th worst pass rush grade in the Power 4 and the 5th worst coverage grade in the Power 4, too. And making matters worse, they lost their top defensive back in cornerback Charles Brantley and their top pass rusher in Chris Bogle from last year's team, too. So what was already one of the worst pass defenses in the Power 4 might have gotten a little bit worse.
Yeah, absolutely. Can they make enough stops, especially in the passing game? Actually, last year, the run defense wasn't bad. I want to throw that in there as a strength also because they had a top 30 run defense grade in the country. So it really is kind of the beginning moments of the Jonathan Smith blueprint. We want to run the football. Last year, they did it with Nate Carter. He's gone, but they're going to figure out the run game under Jonathan Smith, and they stopped the run. They did those 2 things pretty well, and that's what had them in borderline bowl contention there. But you're right. They're going to be their ability to pass and stop the pass, especially because the pass rush and the coverage was not good enough in the secondary for me is a big question this year for them.
Dawn, a lot of people are hyping up Aiden Childs for the 2026 NFL draft. What did you see on tape when you watched him?
Okay, first of all, a dynamic runner, a dynamic athlete, highest rushing grade of any quarterback in the Power 4. That's the first thing to note about him is that he is a bootleg threat, he's a scrambling threat, he's a read option threat in a way that, say, in his previous regime at Oregon State, that DJ Uiagalelei or some of those other quarterbacks were not for Jonathan Smith in those offenses. Aiden Childs' legs make a big difference in this offense. The other things I notice about him as a passer, I think play action, obviously in this system, is very good for him, and an ability to throw it down the middle of the field. When he's targeting the middle third of the field last year, 84.5 passing grade, that's really good. To the outer 2/3 of it, 66.4. So got to get better at spreading the ball around across the field, but I think those middle of the field strikes, deep crossers and overs, deep posts, seam routes down to Jack Velling at tight end. That's where Childs really excels. That's where you want him to excel in this offense, is off of play action and striking down the middle of the field. And then again, dynamic feet as a runner. Now, the big problem, and the thing that we're going to talk about probably endlessly anytime we cover Michigan State, turnover-worthy plays, ball security, 20 turnover-worthy plays last year, most in the Big Ten. With him, it's inconsistent accuracy, and it's staring down targets. 16 of those 20 turnover-worthy plays against zone coverage. You're letting defenders get to your eyes. You're staring down your first read. If he can manipulate defenders better and then just be a little more consistent with his accuracy, right? Those 2 things, obviously, I mean, that's everything. Reading coverages and making accurate throws is everything. He's got to do those 2 things on a more consistent basis before, A, this team takes a big leap, and B, we start talking about Childs as a big-time prospect. But really good athlete, can make, I think, the fundamental throws in Jonathan Smith's offense that he needs him to, but has to be more consistent to all areas of the field, and he has to protect the football. Nothing happens. You don't make a leap as a quarterback, as an offense, if you don't protect the football.
Absolutely. And a guy who should help him out up the seams next year is his tight end in Jack Velling, who's actually my number 8 tight end in college football entering the 2024 season. He's my number 8 tight end in college football entering the 2025 season. So a very consistent player, Jack Velling is. He wasn't as productive this past year at Michigan State as he was the year before at Oregon State. But like I said before, his body of work over those 2 years keeps him in my top 10 tight end list. He has 9 touchdown catches over the last 2 years, tied for the 5th most among Power 4 tight ends. 849 receiving yards in that span is 20th among all tight ends in college football. And in fact, over the last 2 years, there have only been 5 returning FBS tight ends that have been more valuable than Jack Velling according to our wins above average metric. So a guy that could really help out Aiden Childs as he takes the next step in his development is a really good security blanket in Jack Velling.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a big thing too, especially it's something you noticed at Oregon State, I should say, and last year at Michigan State is the play action threat and sneaking Velling behind the linebackers, behind the second level of that defense up the seams. That's a huge part of this offense. And then what you get with the outside threats in Nick Marsh, and hopefully Childs gets better throwing outside, but Velling right now is their most reliable target, just a really consistent player, right? Yeah. And that's the type of guy that you want as your starting tight end, especially a team that's rebuilding like this.
Who is the star defensive player for Michigan State?
Look, they lost some guys in the portal, but we're going to talk about a guy that they got from UCF in the portal last year. That's their safety, Nakai Martinez. He's a guy who really does a little bit of everything, right? He had over 200 snaps last year at free safety, in the box, and in the slot. He's a little bit undersized, which makes it harder for him to tackle some bigger backs and things like that, but he plays with his hair on fire. He's really aggressive and only allowed a 44.2 passer rating into his coverage, which was 3rd among Big Ten safeties. So I think they do have to figure some things out at corner, but on the inside, to have a player like Nakai Martinez with his versatility, that really helps out at least, between the numbers in this secondary. I think I have more questions on the outside than I do on the inside with that.
Yeah, really athletic player. He plays with his hair on fire, which is kind of a negative too, because right now over his career, he has a 0th percentile missed tackle rate in his career. A lot of missed tackles on tape for Nakai Martinez, but he's a very, very good coverage defender for the Spartans right now. Dalton, the over-under for Michigan State is 5.5. So basically, the bottom line for them, will they make a bowl game next year?
This is tough. Because, for as much as they were developing and as young as they were last year, they did go 5-7. Yeah. And they were close in a couple of those other games. I think it was the Boston College game that went down to the wire. They did not play bad when they played Michigan. That was a tighter game maybe than Michigan fans feel it should have been. But, this team, it's like, can they take just it feels like going from 5 to 6 wins really should feel like a baby step, but it always feels like, okay, we got to get to a bowl game first. Let me look at this schedule.
You want to go first?
Time. You go first. You taking it?
I'm going under. It's tough. I think they can squeak out a bowl game with that schedule, but I don't know. I think they'd have to obviously win their first 3 games, which is Western Michigan, Boston College, and Youngstown State, and then they got to probably beat Maryland. They got to beat UCLA, and then probably beat a team they're not supposed to beat too. That's a lot to happen for me to make a bowl game. I'm going to go soft under at 5.5.
They could start 3-0. That's possible.
Yeah.
Boston College is a 50-50 game. UCLA, they get it home.
They should win that game.
Think so. There's some tough road ones. Minnesota, Indiana, Iowa.
Too.
I think so, but that's the thing is where you get to. So even if they start 3-0 and then you get to UCLA and Maryland.
That's 5. And then who do they beat in the other 7 games, though?
You got to pull one off.
That's what I'm saying. I'm going to go under, soft under. I was also saying they're going to beat Boston College and UCLA and Maryland.
No,
too,
and Boston College, that's like a 50-50 game. That's a decent team. And UCLA, at least they get UCLA at home. Maryland they beat Maryland last year, but it was tight. I think I'm with you. I'm just going to make them prove it to me. This is a close one because it wouldn't shock me at all if they made a bowl game, because it really just takes one more step from the same players they had last year. I'm going to take the under and make them prove it, but I might regret it when we see them go 6-6.
Yeah, pretty tough schedule. The 19th hardest schedule in the country. I'm going to go soft under. I think it'll be a 5-7 year once again, unfortunately, for the Michigan State Spartans. All right, next up in our preview is the Minnesota Golden Gophers, who really bounced back nicely from a 6-7 record in 2023 with an 8-5 record this past year. It was the 4th time in the last 6 years that head coach PJ Fleck led the program to at least 8 wins in a season. That is actually their best 6-year stretch since 1900 to 1905. It is incredible. Well, it's been 120 years since Minnesota's won 8 games in 4 of 6 years. So incredible stretch for PJ Fleck at Minnesota. The Golden Gophers defense, the biggest catalyst for the success last year, they were 11th in the nation in terms of EPA per play, a rising superstar at safety, and true sophomore Corey Parrish, my number 2 safety in the country already. The real strength, though, Dalton, of this team is that they should have an elite run game.
Yeah, this is something that came to my attention during the offseason because they already had Darius Taylor, who you had as a top 10 back in the country, and he's so darn physical, right? He brings that he's that guy you don't want to tackle in the cold. But I think to get A.J. Turner, the leading rusher from the Sun Belt champion Marshall Thundering Herd down there, these two guys are going to complement each other really well. Taylor with the power and Turner with the speed. Is it 8.3 yards per carry was last year for Turner?
In the country.
He's a player with explosive speed, and I think who brings a different element to this Minnesota backfield. So I think the first problem that you have when you're playing the Gophers is stopping these two running backs because they're both very good and they both bring different styles to the table.
Absolutely. Yeah, 8.3 yards per carry for A.J. Turner last year, led the country, and he's the number 2 running back at Minnesota because Darius Taylor is a top 10 back in the country. We'll talk about him in just a second later on. Biggest question mark, is there enough to support the run game, though, for Minnesota? Because they have a brand new quarterback in Drake Lindsey, who's a redshirt freshman. Dalton will talk about him in just a second. Only 5 career pass attempts for him right now. They also lost 3 starters from that offensive line, including a second-round pick and offensive tackle, Ariante Ursary. So, yes, 2 great running backs, but a big question mark at quarterback, and you lost 3 starters on the offensive line, including a superstar in Ariante Ursary, too. But, Dalton, tell me more about the quarterback at Minnesota right now, Drake Lindsey.
Yeah, so it's funny. He's kind of the quarterback that you would expect to be starting at a Minnesota. He's tall. He's 6'5". He's 230 pounds. He's kind of an old-school, classic pocket passer, right? He's going to win from the pocket. He can get under center. I think the play action with these 2 backs from under center is going to be a big part of his success. And I think the big thing about him is just that we kind of just don't know what we don't know, right? I can tell you he's a big, sturdy pocket passer. He's kind of old school. He's something you would see, I think, more often, 20, 30 years ago with teams looking for 6'5" and 230-pound pocket passers, but just haven't seen any extended action from him. The only time he got more than a handful of snaps in a game last year came against Rhode Island. He looked pretty good in that game. He's got a good enough arm to make all the throws, but I think it's just that we're going to find out as we go here. I think that's where we're at with Drake Lindsey. He did a nice job. It was decisive enough that he beat out Georgia Tech transfer Zach Pyron in spring ball pretty decisively for the job because Pyron transferred out to South Alabama right after the spring. So it's Drake Lindsey's job right now. He's a pocket passer. They're going to work a lot of the play action game with him. We're just going to see it and evaluate it as we go. I think that's basically where we're at with him.
The reason why play-action games should work a lot in Minnesota next year is because of their rushing attack and because of really Darius Taylor, my number 7 running back in college football entering next year. He's been a star do-it-all back for Minnesota in his first 2 years of college football. 79.9 PFF receiving grade over the last 2 years, leads all running backs in the Power 4. 1,317 yards after contact over the last 2 years, is second among returning Power 4 running backs. So one of the best runners in college football and a great receiving back, 2, really good size, 6 feet tall, 215 pounds. He has long strides and the mentality to punish defensive backs who try to tackle him. He doesn't have the great long speed right now, but like Dalton said, he is a bruising running back who's a really capable receiver too.
And they brought in Turner to give that explosive, speedy element and help them in the passing game. No, Taylor's a horse. I mean, when you think about just some of the backs that they've had in the past, these big physical backs at Minnesota, he falls right in line with that. I think when you look at Darius Taylor playing in that cold weather, playing those home games in Minnesota, playing all those physical Big Ten games against the Iowas and the Wisconsins of the world, right? I think Taylor is the perfect back to have. And again, I think it really helps that Turner can take some of the load off of him, even if you have a fresh Darius Taylor for 4 quarters, because we know he's had some injury things in the past too. Man, oh man, those 2 guys fresh and complimenting. I'm really excited to watch both of them.
And we love Darius Taylor, but Dalton, a guy who's already a top 20 player in college football for us on our PFF College 50 is the star of this Minnesota defense.
So we've had a lot of talk over the past couple years about a couple of 2026 safeties in Caleb Downs and Dylan Thieneman. If you draft scouts are looking for one for 2027, go to Minnesota. Minnesota and watch Coy Parrish. This is a special athlete who can do everything on a football field, even doubled as their kick returner last year, and didn't even start the full 12 games. It took him a few weeks to get into the starting lineup. He was mostly a special teamer, but this is a special athlete. 5 interceptions last year, second most among all safeties behind Xavier Watts, who was a third-round pick for the Falcons. 7th best PFF grade in the country among safeties. One of just 7 safeties to have an 80 run defense grade and an 80 coverage grade. Him and Kerry Brown are going to carry the secondary at safety, but Coy Parrish, I think, is on the way to being a special football player. He showed great things in his first year as a free safety back there at Minnesota. He can do a little bit of everything. I think this is somebody, we keep talking about this 2027 class. This could be the best safety in that class. He is a spectacular football player.
My number 2 safety in the country, only reason why he's not number 1 is because the best defensive player in the country plays safety too, and Caleb Downs, who we'll talk about in just a second at Ohio State. But Coy Parrish, man, it was crazy considering, we're looking at Minnesota last year and said, man, they just lost Tyler Nubin, one of the best safeties in college football. Now he's with the New York Giants. How are they going to replace him? Well, they immediately found a new one in Coy Parrish, who's just a superstar safety for Minnesota, and right now is the favorite to be the top safety in college football entering the 2026 season once Caleb Downs goes on to the NFL. All right, Dalton, bottom line time for Minnesota right now. Their win total is set at 6.5 for the Golden Gophers. And I mentioned before, they have won 8 games in 4 of the last 6 years with PJ Fleck as the head coach. So you're going over and buying into that history, or will it be kind of a step back with a brand new quarterback?
That's the biggest question, is when you have quarterback questions, you go, that makes you hesitate a little bit. Can they get to 7? 1, 2, I think 3, 4, 5, 6. I think they could get to 7. They might get right at 7. This is just PJ Fleck's just got a good program. They got a really good defense. They can really run the ball. They're going to have to protect Lindsey. I mean, that's what it's going to come down to, is if they really don't have any passing game, that's the scenario where the under hits here. But I think I'm leaning defense, run game, fundamentally sound football, row the boat with PJ Fleck. I think 7 sounds like a realistic target. I'll take him to squeak over on that one. I think it's just, this team has got a really solid foundation.
Yep.
And I like the run game. I like the defense. I think because of Lindsey, they're not going to pull like some huge upset like, say, at Ohio State or at Oregon. But I look at the other 10 games here, and they're going to be at least in all of them, even with Lindsey as a freshman starting quarterback. I think 7-5 is realistic. They can do that.
I'm taking the over too on that. So yeah, I mean, really, like I said, 4 of the last 6 years, they won at least 8 games. And one of those seasons that they didn't win 8 games was the 2020 season, the COVID-shortened one. So
they're in this middle group of the Big Ten with, we're going to talk about, it's like Minnesota, Michigan State, maybe Iowa, Rutgers, USC, Washington, of like, they're going to be playing a bunch of coin flip games, and we'll find out whether some of those teams sneak over or not their goals. But they're right squarely in like that second group where it's like, I don't think you're a playoff contender, but you're still a pretty darn good football team.
Listen, Minnesota is going to play a smash-mouth brand of football next year with their defense and with that run game. That alone should be enough to make a bowl game, in my opinion, for Minnesota. Drake Lindsey, just how good he is as a redshirt freshman, which we don't really know much about him, with only 5 career pass attempts. How good he is will determine the ceiling, but even so, I'm taking the over for Minnesota. They should win, I think, 7 games, considering they've won 8 games in a lot of recent years, too, for that program. So that wraps up our Minnesota preview. Next up is the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Nebraska finally broke its 7-year streak with a losing record in 2024 with a 7-6 record, winning the Pinstripe Bowl for their first bowl victory in 9 years. 2015 was the last time Nebraska won its bowl game. The Cornhuskers defense was the biggest reason for the success, with the 26th best defense in EPA per play. Another catalyst, was the fact that they brought really good stability at quarterback in a 5-star true freshman in Dylan Raiola coming in and immediately kind of living up to the hype as a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. Now, of course, 71.5 passing grade won't blow you away from Raiola last year, but remember, he was a true freshman playing at the Big Ten level, and anything above a 70 is actually a really good mark for a true freshman at that kind of level. And they had a 42.4 passing grade in 2023, which was the 3rd worst in the country. So yes, a lot better than it was in 2023. His development as a sophomore, along with a really exciting group of wide receivers, is really the biggest strength of the team going into next year. Biggest question mark is the defense, because even though it was so good last year, they did lose a lot of contributors from that defense last year. Can it be a strength of the team once again in 2025? But Dalton, I cannot wait to watch Dylan Raiola and how he develops in year 2.
Does he not feel like one of the biggest X factors in this whole conference?
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, because you got to think, okay, last year you mentioned it, he's Dylan Raiola, everybody knows him. He's starting as a true freshman. There's all this pressure. He's in the spotlight, right? And it's just, and then there's all the Mahomes stuff and everything else that people talk about with him, but he had a pretty good freshman year. And when you look at what Nebraska's been trying to build, and when they got him last year, obviously his dad playing there helped, but I think you're talking about a team that these next 2 years, this is the window. They need to build around him, and they need him to be the special football player that he was recruited to be. Good freshman season. I like that they went and got some receivers for him, Dane Key and Neziah Hunter, right, from Kentucky and Cal. They've got Ja'Cory Barney also. I think this is what we're going to be looking for. If the defense does take a slight step back, if the running game, I should say, does take a slight step back, they're going to rely on Raiola to carry them. That's kind of the point of this era of Nebraska football is, hey, we got this big-time recruit. What was he, the number 3 quarterback recruit in the country last year?
Yeah.
I mean, that's why you bring this guy in, to carry you. Because if you want to be the team that your quarterback carries you to victories and carries you to the promised land, now's the moment. And it really does come down to him. I do think not only for their team, but he's one of the biggest X factors in this whole conference. He could make a difference.
He absolutely is. And he's a guy who could be a first-round pick in 2027, considering how toolsy he is, how he's got the NFL body already. And he was pretty good as a true freshman last year, too. Question mark is, can this defense still perform at a high level with so many losses they had? Because listen, they lost 8 of their 10 most valuable defenders from last year's team according to our wins above average. I mentioned before, 26th best defense in the country in terms of APA per play. They lost so much, though. The defense really was the biggest reason why they made their first bowl game in 8 years. But with so many guys leaving now, I think that offense will have to step up a lot more in 2025. But Dalton, tell me more about Raiola. What did you like from him in his true freshman year, and what is the strengths and weaknesses of his game right now?
So there's so often splits on guys. You know, there's even other guys we've talked about in other previews where it's, okay, is it clean versus pressure? Is it play action versus not? Is it a certain area of the field? Is it coverages? I think what it is for Dylan Raiola that we saw last year, when he's thrown into zone coverage, he's fantastic. He's got a very natural feel with his arm talent for layering throws over defenders. He can throw off platform. He can throw from different angles. He throws with great touch and velocity at the same time. He's really good at throwing balls into windows. When you look at how he played against zone coverage last year, 82.3 passing grade, that was top 20 in the country. He was really good, and he was completing almost 75% of his passes against zone coverage. 7th best in the country at 74.6%. So he understands defenses. He sees windows, and he layers throws, I think, especially into the intermediate range on those deep overs as well as anybody in the country. Now, let's go the other way. And this isn't all his fault because their receiving core was not very good last year, and that's why they went out and got guys like Dane Key and Neziah Hunter, right? 55.7 passing grade versus man coverage, bottom 15 in the country. 8 turnover-worthy plays against man coverage last year, 4th most in the country. It really is a big coverage split with him that when teams challenge Nebraska's receivers, and I get it. He's forcing it. He was forcing it a little bit because he kind of had to, right? I mean, what else are you going to do? He's not a guy who's going to take off and scramble like a Jaden Daniels every play. That's not his deal. He wants to win from the pocket, right? But he needs better separators on the outside. He needs to not force some of those throws because some of them were on him, and he's got to be a little more accurate in deciding when to throw into those tight windows and not. The only other thing I have for him, if it's me, I'm hoping somebody this offseason put him in the Joe Burrow school of 2 hands on the football. Because he's real loose with the football in the pocket. That one hand kind of Brett Favre-ing it down by his hip. That's the one thing I would like to see him fix.
Does Mahomes do that? Because that might be why he does it.
That might be it. That might be the reason too. A little loose with the football in the pocket, though. Some of the strip sacks I think are avoidable. But for the most part, what I see is a guy who's spectacular against zone coverage and does see the field well for such a young kid. And you can tell he's got the pedigree. And then against man-to-man, him and his receivers are both going to have to be better.
Absolutely. Yeah, I loved what I saw from him last year. I know it wasn't the perfect season for Dylan Raiola by any means, but that was really, really encouraging for a true freshman. And like I said, he's got an NFL arm and an NFL body. He should be playing on Sundays pretty soon. But he still has 2 more years of college football, and a guy should help him out a lot in his sophomore year is a transfer coming in Dane Key from Kentucky. 6'3", big target for Dylan Raiola. can go up and grab 50-50 balls with the best of them. 11 contested catches this past year were third among all SEC wide receivers. Really good at finding the soft spots in zone coverage too. In fact, he placed in the 91st percentile of FBS wideouts in receiving grade against zone coverage last year. He will be the X receiver for Dylan Raiola as a sophomore and probably a top weapon for Nebraska next year too. And Dalton could be a guy that helps out Raiola a lot against man coverage.
Absolutely. No, I think I hate using. I need to find another word, but he's kind of the key to their whole season.
Yeah.
It's why they brought him in. He's a legitimate NFL, maybe top 100 prospect as a receiver. They have to win one-on-one. And think about the teams in the Big Ten that we either have or haven't talked about yet. When you think about, even a Purdue and Illinois, there's other teams, Michigan, these teams that want to run man-to-man coverage, and they do it a lot. And teams in the Big Ten, when they know they have a team beat in man-to-man coverage, they're gonna stay on it. They're gonna stay on the gas. They have no reason to. Illinois, when they play certain teams that lack at receiver, they have no reason not to send 5 and go press cover 1 the entire game. And teams like that will do that against Nebraska. They did it against Nebraska last year, and it was a real problem for them. You have to make him respect you. If Dane Key can win those one-on-one separation, those one-on-one battles, I should say, with that frame, especially the contested catches, you make teams think about it a little. And then you get Raiola throwing in again to zone coverage where he was top 20 last year. The improvement of this receiving core is crucial to their entire season. That's
Absolutely.
Really going to make the biggest difference out of anything.
Yeah, he's great against man coverage, Dane Key is, and also, like I just said before, is 91st percentile against zone coverage too. So that should help out Raiola a lot, and he should be the number 1 weapon for Nebraska next year. Dalton, who is the top defensive player on a defense that did lose a lot of talent?
Let's get into a fun transfer from Georgia Southern. Marcus Watson Trent, the linebacker. He kind of comes from the Ivan Pace Jr. school of undersized linebacker that should not be a good run defender, but he's a really darn good run defender. 90.1 run defense grade last year at Georgia Southern, 6th best in the country. And he's only 5'11 and 225, very similar size to Pace. He doesn't blitz the same way Pace does, but it's that same thing where his eyes and his feel and he's a low-key good tackler for that size. That in run defense is going to be a big key for him. I think about Ivan Pace Jr. I think Kobe King was a little bit bigger, but similar style player where you have a guy with elite vision in run defense and is good enough in coverage. The lack of range is going to get him sometimes, but I think Marcus Watson Trent there as probably their weak side linebacker and a really good run defender. I think he's going to make a big impact coming up from Georgia Southern. He can play Big Ten football.
Really good run defender. Also had 70+ coverage grades in each of the last 2 years at Georgia Southern too. So I'm a really big fan of him. I'm excited to see what he could do in the Big Ten level now with Nebraska. Dalton, their win total is set at 7.5 right now. Are you taking the over or under? Will Nebraska take a step forward in year 2 with Raiola, or will it be kind of much more of the same in 2025?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I'm going over.
I think I'm going over. I don't know if they're in the playoff-ish Indiana-Illinois range.
I will say it's the second easiest schedule in the Big Ten, according to our power rankings.
There's only one game here, and that's at Penn State, that I'm like, no, they're not going to win that game.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, in a conference that there are a lot of questions for a lot of teams at quarterback, there's no question who this team's quarterback is, and as talented as he is, that's really what you're hoping for. If he takes the step forward and he throws out there an 85 passing grade or something like that this year, they're going to be good.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of if he can do that, and because he's under a ton of pressure, no question. It's been that way since he stepped on campus, but I don't think that part bothers him.
He's like the Bryce Underwood for Nebraska, essentially.
I mean,
like
it's the same thing. Yeah, it's Lagway at Florida, it's Underwood at Michigan, it's Raiola at Nebraska. We need to not forget. I mean, he got this. He broke this team's the bowl streak that you mentioned. Was 7 years, 6 years?
8 years.
8 years. I mean, that's him. I know the defense was good too.
That's a storied program too.
So exactly. So I'll 7.5 was it?
Yeah.
I'll take it. I'll go over on it. I like this schedule. I only see one game on here that I go, no, they can't win it. They only have one West Coast trip to UCLA, which I think they should win anyway. I'm a fan of this. I think how many true road games today? I'm looking at this now. 1, 2. They only have 4 true road games all year.
Because Cincinnati's at Arrowhead.
That's at Arrowhead, and that's going to be mostly Nebraska people.
And you know Raiola playing in Arrowhead.
Oh, that's yeah.
It's going to show out.
You know that was done. Of course, whoever's writing the script did
that. Travis Kelce's alma mater in Cincinnati, and then the guy who's cosplaying as Patrick Mahomes.
They'll probably all be there on a,
I know we're getting
a Thursday night.
We're getting a lot of flack to him. Raio's a very talented player.
Thursday night football there.
I know. That's going to be a heck of a game, man. I'm excited for that one. I'm going
Bengals Chiefs was good.
I'm going over, man. I'm not saying this is a playoff team, but I'm not also excluding it from the realm of possibilities for them this year.
There's a handful of teams in the country where we're going to go, if their quarterback takes a leap, right? Florida, we've done it. South Carolina, we've done it. There's a handful of others where you go, hey, you know what? The quarterback, Raiola's on that list. We need to not forget how talented he is.
I never thought about Nebraska as a legitimate contender to make the playoff this year. I'm not saying they're going to make it, but looking at the schedule, I'm like, there is a world where they can make a run here.
If he burst on the scene and was a top 10 quarterback in the country this year, they could win 10 games. There's 10, if not 11 possible. I'm saying possible win. The only game I'm like, no, is I don't think they're going to Penn State and win.
Agreed. That's the only one. But everything else, they could win every
other game.
Yeah,
I don't see why not.
I never thought about that before.
Their road games are Penn State, and then their other 3 road games are Maryland, Minnesota, UCLA.
See, this is why I love doing previews for every team, because like there's teams I never even thought about as playoff contenders before. I'm like looking at them like, damn, this is a world.
That's the fun part. Is later in the year, by about week 7 or 8, I try to keep track of like who's still alive. They're probably going to be on that list of teams that are still alive at that point. If they're not, then there's a serious problem.
I hate to add more pressure to Dylan Raiola, considering how much he is already under at Nebraska. But man, this is a manageable schedule.
Their first Big Ten game against Michigan at home. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, they better improve a lot.
And if we get Raiola versus Underwood in that game in Nebraska, their season could get fun really quick.
Still question marks with that defense, obviously, but if Raiola takes the next step as a passer, as a sophomore, they could really make a lot of noise in the Big Ten next year. But next up in our preview is the Northwestern Wildcats, who one of the biggest surprises in college football in 2023 with an 8-5 record, despite going 1-11 the year before. And even with that, Dawn, even more impressive considering head coach Pat Fitzgerald was fired a couple months before the season due to his part in a hazing scandal at Northwestern, and that really led to David Braun being the new head coach as the interim head coach, and he earned the full-time job after a great year. Now, Northwestern did come crashing back down this past year with a 4-8 record. Their defense, coached by David Braun, was still at an admirable level, but the offense really fell apart. Was the Power Four's fourth worst offense in terms of EPA per play. They did get a lot better at quarterback this offseason, getting a guy like Preston Stone coming in, but it remains to be seen if he has the weapons for him to truly shine back there. But Dawn, this is a quarterback situation at Northwestern that is really night and day.
Absolutely. I mean, last year they had a few guys rotating in at quarterback that they just weren't going to get the job done, right? And I think the biggest ray of hope for this team this season is that Preston Stone in 2023 was one of the best quarterbacks in the country that season at SMU. He broke his leg late in the year. Kevin Jennings took the job over and basically just never gave it up, even last year in 2024. But even the moments where we got to see Preston Stone play at SMU last year, he was pretty solid, right? And obviously he couldn't wrestle the job back away from Jennings. Jennings had a great season, brought the Mustangs to the playoffs and all that. But I think when you look at the biggest area improvement for this for this team is this quarterback room. I mean, Preston Stone is miles better than anything they had last year. I mean, they were just – it was even going into the season, it was the biggest concern for me. I was like, who's the quarterback? This is tough. Now we know who it is. Now you can start to function as an offense.
They had the second worst passing grade as a team last year in the Power Four with a 49.5 passing grade last year. Preston Stone, over the last 2 years, has a 91.3 passing grade, 5th among all quarterbacks in the country. Dawn, the 4 above him: Bo Nix, Jackson Dart, Jaden Daniels, Shador Sanders. That's it.
Good players.
So, yeah, those are the only 4 who had a better passing grade than Preston Stone over the last 2 years. So, not saying he's going to be a first-round pick like most of those players, or really should have been all of those players should have been. But Preston Stone is a much better quarterback than anything Northwestern's had in probably a very long time in that program, honestly. Now, the question is, does he have the weapons to truly shine? Because there's still a question about who's going to throw to at Northwestern right now. They had the second worst receiving grade in the Power 4 this past season. They did add a really good transfer in Griffin Wild from South Dakota State, one of the better receivers in the FCS level last year. But you're kind of banking on him being as good at the Big Ten level as he was at the FCS level. So that's a big question mark for Northwestern, that passing game right now. But Dawn, with a guy like Preston Stone, who's still a really talented quarterback, and I know he lost his job last year to Kevin Jennings, but Kevin Jennings is a top 10 quarterback in the country, in our opinion. He is still a really, really talented quarterback.
So, and Wild, you mentioned, is going to be a huge part of this because last year at was it South Dakota State, he was at a perfect 99.9 deep receiving grade. He can get downfield. He's 6'2", 200 pounds. He's got the speed to get downfield. Why is that important for Stone? Because 2 years ago in that SMU offense, he was slinging it deep downfield constantly. How about an average depth of target, Max, of 13.6 yards that season, second highest in the country. 30 big-time throws in 2023, fourth best in the country. Now, to be honest with you, he doesn't have a Josh Allen, Justin Herbert type of A-plus arm, but he throws the deep ball with really nice touch and timing and accuracy. That's really where he wins. 94.3 passing grade on 10-plus yard throws in 2023, fifth behind, I think it was those same four guys you just said, Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, Shedeur Sanders. Throwing the ball downfield, he does it as well as anybody when he's got time in the pocket to do it. The difference is he's a little too reliant on it, right? 13.6 yard average depth of target. I'm going to tell you right now, it's not going to get it done in the Big Ten. In the American, you can do that. In maybe, some other high-flying offenses down the G5, you can do that. Maybe sometimes even in the ACC, but 13.5 yard, that's going to have to come down some, and he's going to have to be more accurate underneath. His footwork's a little bit inconsistent, but his accuracy, actually, I should say the footwork creates a lack of accuracy on underneath throws. So if he can make some of the easier throws in this offense to set up the home run ball, that's not going to be there quite as often against the defenses in this conference. Preston Stone could be really good. He can sling it downfield, no question. He can move outside the pocket a little bit. It's just a matter of the in-between and not having such high variance in his game.
A guy who should help him a lot at left tackle is Caleb Tiernan. Yes, Northwestern has yet another stud pass blocker at left tackle after Rashawn Slater and Peter Skoronski. Now Caleb Tiernan is a new star at left tackle for them. He had an 88.9 pass blocking grade as a redshirt junior this past year, fifth among all tackles in college football. 80-plus pass blocking grade in 8 of the 12 games last year. That is an elite stuff right there for Caleb Tiernan. And is worth mentioning, he was still 9th among all Big Ten tackles with a 74.8 run blocking grade too, but he's one of the best pass blockers in the country and should be a great blindside protector for Preston Stone at offense next year.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's the key to it always, right, is pass protection, especially in a conference that's so good in the trenches. And having Tiernan there, such a smooth pass blocker, great technique there at left tackle. So it's a huge help. It makes a new quarterback coming into a new system feel really good in the pocket that he's going to be able to have time to make those throws downfield. So having Tiernan is such a huge asset for this team at left tackle for sure.
Absolutely, Dalton. But who is going to be the star defensive player for David Braun in that defense?
So, there was some transfers that they had leave out of this secondary and some really darn good players. And David Braun over the last couple of years has built some nice secondaries that we've seen. And this year, I think a young kid he's going to be relying on is the safety Damon Walters. He only made 5 starts last year, played through only 359 snaps, but I think this is an up-and-comer that they're going to rely on a lot more this year. 76.3 coverage grade last season, just a 14.6 passer rating allowed into his coverage. That was the third best among any qualified safety in the country. So it's a young player like Damon Walters at safety who can get back there, especially I think I was really impressed with the way he could play a deep half in those 2 high shells. I think that's somebody who he's going to rely on, but this team is going to have to find some veteran help for him too. But Damon Walters, a young player, I really liked this tape last year.
Dawn, the over-under for Northwestern is set at 3.5, which is lower than they had even last year when they went 4-8 last year. So are they take a step back, or with Preston Stone now, will they take a step forward as a program? I'm going over. I'm saying this right now.
3.5 feels kind of. This is a tough schedule, but you feel like they could find 4 wins here, right?
With Preston Stone, they went 4-8 with one of the worst quarterback situations in the country last year.
It was like bottom 5 easy.
And now you got. I don't think anyone improved a quarterback more than Northwestern this offseason, honestly.
Yeah, I feel like 4.
3.5 is low.
I feel like you almost have to take the. If they win 3 games or less, there's a problem. Real issue at Northwest. No, they should win at least 4. I'm going with that. Okay, at Tulane is tough. Tulane is good, but then I see there's a couple other out of conferences.
Western Illinois is going to win.
They get UCLA at home. They
Louisiana
get Purdue.
Monroe.
They get Purdue at home. Pull something else in a conference with a lot of tight. They should get at least 4.
Yeah,
I would think.
I'm with that, dude. You beat Tulane, Western Illinois, UCLA, Louisiana Monroe.
If Stone is anything close to 2023, I mean, you're going to mess around and make a bowl game.
Yeah. I see 5 games that they might be favored in.
Possibly, yeah.
So I'm going over. I think they can make a bowl game next year. I really think a bowl game is possible for them next year.
If they, I mean, all they got to do is just they got to find some veterans on defense. But David Braun's always got a pretty good. They've
done great on defense.
I think it's undersold how bad their quarterback situation was, because wasn't it? It was Jack Lausch and Mike Wright for the most part. Right.
The second worst passing grade in Power 4 last year. Yeah.
I mean, Stone, even if he's not.
I think
even the moments that he played last year, Stone had like an 80 passing grade, didn't he?
Yeah, which is why you and I were like, why is he getting benched for Kevin Jennings? Of course, Jennings went on to have a great year.
And Jennings is really good in his own right. He earned that job.
I think people are forgetting about Preston Stone.
Stone is good.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not. If they win less than 4 games, there's other issues at hand there.
I might bet that right now, honestly. I think 3.5, that's a very low win total for what Northwestern has right now.
That feels disrespectful for what Braun has done his first. I know last year they didn't win a lot of games, but they're
8-5 when nobody thought they could have gone up to a bowl game.
I wasn't sure they were going to win a game that year.
Yeah, and then 4-8.
And let me look at this again. They lost to Duke in double overtime.
Yeah.
Some of these other games, I mean, there was some other games they got blown out, but they didn't have a quarterback. So it's like, and they won 4 games last year anyway. Yeah, I'll take it. But if they don't win 4 games, there's something wrong.
I can't think of another team that improved at quarterback more than Northwestern did. I think that's the biggest improvement
off the top of my head now.
I can't. Yeah. I literally cannot think of another one. So I think that is night and day for what they had. I'm going over for Northwestern. We've got a loaded second half of the preview here for the Big Ten. But before we get to that, to go to the sponsor of the show, that is Fabric by Gerber Life. What does your child's future success look like to you? A job they're passionate about, traveling around the world, or just being happy and comfortable? Whatever their journey, you can make it easier to achieve with a kids investment account from Fabric by Gerber Life. By making a contribution to your child's future today, you can help give them the means to pursue their dreams, big and small. Fabric by Gerber Life was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With a kids investment account from Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future today. Kids can't invest when they're minors, but a kids investment account allows you to invest on their behalf now, giving their investments more time to grow. It's all online and setting up an account to 5 minutes. Then you can manage your child's account and monitor investments right from your phone. Start with just $20 with no contribution limits, tax advantages, and your funds are SIPC insured up to $500,000. Plus, no commission fees and just a low, flat monthly maintenance fee. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Start investing in your child today at meetfabric.com/PFFcollege. That's meetfabric.com/PFFcollege, meetfabric.com/PFFcollege. Portfolios managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors Incorporated. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. Learn more at meetfabric.com. Dawn, we might have the 3 favorites in the Big Ten back to back to back right here on this preview right now. Starting off with the defending national champion Ohio State Buckeyes. And listen, even back as early as or late as December really of last year, we had major question marks with Ohio State. They lost for a 4th straight time to their arch rival in Michigan. Ryan Day, that guy right there, his back was against the wall heading into the college football playoff. If they did not perform up to their talent level, he might have been sent packing last year. So how did he respond? They beat Tennessee, they beat Oregon, they beat Texas, they beat Notre Dame, all the way to a national championship victory. All 4 of those teams are among the best in the country, obviously, and they beat all 4 of those teams in convincing fashion to win their first national title in a decade. Now, yes, Ohio State did lose 14 players who were drafted in the 2025 NFL draft, which is tied for the second most ever for a school in one draft, but they still have the 2 best players in the sport in Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs.
Absolutely. That's where it starts. I mean, look, for as much as, we obviously get into the weeds on this show with everything we do, and we're going to have a ton of the Ohio State games all year, facts are facts. When you have the 2 best players in the country, when you have one of the best receivers we've ever seen in Jeremiah Smith, and you have one of the best safeties that we've seen in a long time in Caleb Downs, I mean, that's where it starts. And you look at the trickle down that it creates. Look at the offensive weaponry for Ohio State. Then you've got a guy like Carnell Tate, who for most teams would be their number one.
Yeah.
He's your 2. You've got Max Clare at tight end. You got a loaded group of weapons for what we think Julian's saying it'll be at quarterback to work with. And then secondary is still going to be good, right? They lost a lot of veteran talent, but you still bring back around downs Davis and Igbinosun. You've got Jermaine Matthews. You've got some other young kids because Ohio State's always recruiting great in the secondary. But the foundation of this team now and for the next this year with Downs, he'll be a top 10 pick next year. And then in 27 with Jeremiah, you have the 2 best football players in the country. Yep. And the fact that you can base a unit around each of them, what a huge advantage.
We've done the PFF College 50, ranking the top 50 players in college football at PFF for about a decade now. I've tried to find every single article we've done. I could not find another instance where the top 2 players play for the same school. So this is the first time ever that the top 2 players in college football come from the same school in Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs. So yes, a brand new quarterback, brand new coordinators too, because they lost both their coordinators, one of them to Penn State, one of them to the NFL, and Chip Kelly. So they have Matt Patricia now on defense and Brian Hartline, who's now promoted to offensive coordinator. Those are the question marks, but you have the 2 best players in the country in wide receiver Jeremiah Smith and safety Caleb Downs. Question mark, Dalton, is kind of the one weakness of the team last year. It was the offensive line, because last year, 69.3 offensive line grade. That was 63rd in the country. They also lost 2 first-round picks from that offensive line in Donovan Jackson and Josh Simmons, and they lost a Remington Award-winning center in Seth McLaughlin, too. All 5 projected starters this year had sub-70 PFF grades in 2024, including Rice transfer Ethan Onyanwa, who should be taking over at left tackle. So the offensive line is still pretty easily, I think, the biggest question mark for this Ohio State team right now, which could be an issue for the new quarterback, Dalton and Julian Sayin.
Absolutely. I think when you look at that offensive line, last year after Josh Simmons got hurt is when things really started to become more of a struggle for Ohio State offensively. And bear in mind, too, you're replacing your offensive coordinator, Chip Kelly, who's now with the Raiders, and Jim Knowles on the defensive side as well needs to be mentioned. This is a team replacing both coordinators, but I think especially offensively, what really bailed them out of those offensive line struggles? 1, moving Donovan Jackson to left tackle, and he was great in the playoff. 2, the adjustments up front that Chip Kelly made, especially in the run game, and understanding what needed to be done to cover those flaws. Can Brian Hartline do the same thing? But when you get into Julian Sayin, now you're talking about a guy who was the number 2 quarterback in the country last year coming out of high school, is DJ Lagway, then Julian Sayin, then Dylan Raiola.
Still a top 10 recruit overall.
Absolutely. A kid with a ton of talent. I think he's urgent and accurate from the pocket, right? I think you're going to get a little less movement than you would from a Will Howard in that offense, where Howard can move outside the pocket and even get in the design run game a little bit. But I think his release is, I'm not saying at all, I'm not trying to compare guys and what their careers are going to be, but his delivery, his release reminds me a little of Drew Brees. He kind of darts passes in an accurate manner out in front of him. I don't think he's got a lights out A+ arm, but I think he could be really accurate and he can throw the ball on time in this offense. And I think what you're looking at, honestly, is just, again, I've had this with 1 or 2 other guys. I think Malik Washington, even in Maryland too, is we're just not going to know until we know, right? Yeah. And the good news is he's got maybe the best set of weapons in the country. And hey, Julian, when in doubt, chuck it up to number 4, and I'm sure something good will happen. But he's going to get a fun test that first week against Texas, isn't he? But I think that's what you're looking at, is a pocket passer that if they can protect him, if Brian Hartline can find ways to protect him up front, Sayin can be good, because I think accuracy might be his best trait. Yeah,
I'm really excited to watch him next year, and I was really impressed by the spring game he had this past year. Again, I know it's a spring game. It's really all you have to go off of for Julian Sayin. Top 10 overall recruit coming out of high school. Very, very talented passer. And Jeremiah Smith, we'll talk about right now, he was very complimentary of Julian Sayin. He's like, man, he throws a very catchable football. So.
And that's honestly, I think that's the best way to put it. It's catchable, and it just gets where it needs to be. Yeah. Again, that's where I look at like the Drew Brees kind of out in front release, because he just gets it where it needs to. And he's willing to step up in the pocket, which is a really big asset. I think especially over the middle of the field, Sayin's going to be really good.
So the offensive player spotlight and the defensive player spotlight has never been easier than the Ohio State Buckeyes, because like I said before, the 2 best players in the country play for Ohio State, and both of them are on different sides of the ball too. Offensive, obviously, the best player in college football, that is Jeremiah Smith. Second time ever, and for the first time since Trevor Lawrence in 2019, the number 1 player in the PFF College 50 is a rising true sophomore. Jeremiah Smith was the number 1 overall recruit in the 2024 class, the highest rated wide receiver ever to come out of high school, lived up to the hype immediately in Columbus as a true freshman, was the most valuable receiver in the country last year according to our wins above average metric, 89.8 receiving grade, was 3rd in the country, and was more than 4 points higher than any other returning receiver in college football. Led the Power 4 with 15 receiving touchdowns, was 2nd in the Power 4 in receiving yards, only behind Tedero McMillan. And Tedero McMillan, I said this before, was the only really option in that Arizona offense. Jeremiah Smith had to compete with Emeka Egbuka, with Carnell Tate, with the running backs Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson for touches in that offense. Still 2nd in the Power 4 in receiving yards as a true freshman. He's an athletic freak, 6'3". Now I think 225. He said he gained weight this offseason as if he needed it. Incredibly refined skill set. Everything I've heard about the kid, he's the hardest worker in the building every single time. He is a generational type of receiver and still has to play 2 more years of college football. He's only 19 years old right now. He's on the cover of EA College Football 26. Just the kind of hype he had coming into high school is not even enough for how good he was as a true freshman. Dalton, this is truly going to be, I think, one of the greatest receivers we've ever seen in college football.
It's Calvin Johnson, it's Julio Jones, it's A.J. Green. It's on that level. If he was allowed to be in this past draft, he would have gone in the top 4.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you're looking at. Possibly as high as 2nd, no lower than 4th to New England. I think they would have taken. And I like Will Campbell a lot, but if New England had Jeremiah sitting there at 4 available to him,
you can't pass him up.
You can't pass. I mean, it's just you run out of things to say about him. And it's only been 1 year, and I've already run out of things to say. He's just a freak of nature, right? I mean, you've got one on offense, and then you got another one on defense in Caleb Downs, who I think is the best safety prospect at least since Kyle Hamilton.
Yeah.
Is that where we're at right now with this?
Yeah.
I mean, he's just Caleb Downs. Even his freshman year at Alabama, I was so darn impressed with just his football IQ. Obviously, his older brother plays wide receiver, Josh Downs, in the NFL. But Caleb is the key to their whole defense. And the number of different things schematically that he allowed Jim Knowles to do last year. And we'll see if Matt Patricia can take some of those ideas and maybe even get more creative with him this year. But Caleb Downs, look, he plays safety, but in certain looks, he was kind of their middle linebacker. He's a great tackler. He's got spectacular vision. He's everything. I could say everything that you need a safety to do, and that's what Caleb Downs is. He's the best defensive player in the country. I'm not sure it's close at the moment. It's just he can do it all. Coverage, run defense. If you want to blitz him, you can. I'm sure that'd be fine. I mean, he can play anywhere. And not only that, I don't know if he's going to stay returning punts this year, but we saw a pretty darn good punt return against Indiana, too. That just shows you the type of athlete that he is. Caleb Downs is as special a defensive player as you could have in the country.
I mentioned this before, but he is now the number 1 safety in the country in 2 straight years in our offseason rankings. The only other players who were number 1 at their position for 2 straight years, or multiple years, I should say, Trevor Lawrence, Derek Stingley Jr., Brock Bowers. All of them top 15 picks. Caleb Downs should be a top 15 pick. I know there's been kind of a run of great safeties recently that fall out of the top 15, like Kyle Hamilton and like Malachi Starks. This is a guy who Trevor Sickman's right upstairs right now, actually, for PFF week this week. I was talking to him this morning. He's like, yeah, he's the best player in the draft. Caleb Downs is the best player.
I think at the moment, until whatever quarterbacks emerge, and obviously there's always somebody that's like, oh my God, look at the season he had. Yeah, no, he's number 1. He's the best football player in the 2026 class right now.
Unbelievable player
question.
As a run defender and as a coverage defender. He could do anything for a defense. And then as a punt returner, too, like Dalton said, that punt return touchdown against Indiana was insane. So
you're going to see him play running back?
Maybe, honestly.
We had rumors about it last year.
And they lost Judkins and Henderson. So maybe a little Heisman campaign for Caleb Downs. Hit him against Jeremiah Smith for the Heisman Trophy next year. Honestly, that'd be pretty electric. But he's an incredible player. 2 incredible players at Ohio State. But Dalton, is that enough for the Buckeyes? Because I know they lost so much from last year's team. The win total right now set at 10.5. Are you going over or under? And do they still have a chance to go back-to-back and win the national title next year?
I will tell you, I'm not going to take them to repeat. And I think because of the youth at quarterback, the 2 new coordinators on each side, offensive and defensive, and I know Hartline's been in the system for a long time, but 2 new coordinators, new quarterback, whole lot of new names on defense. I'm not going to take them to win the title. I'm not going to take them to repeat. I will pick somebody else. Where
would you put them right now? Like top 5?
Well, they can still make the playoff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they could absolutely still make the playoff. They're probably like in the top. You probably still have to put them in the top 8 for all the talent. The only thing, and that number, this is where the betting thing gets fun because you talk about a 10.5 win total, right? So you're telling me If I'm taking the over on a team that went 10-2 last year, don't forget, they're either A, they're going to beat Texas week 1.
Yeah.
I'm not even all the way in on that decision yet. Or B, they're going to lose to Texas, and they're going to reel off the other 11. It's tough. They haven't beat Michigan in a while.
Penn State's loaded.
You never know what else happens, especially with a young quarterback and a young defense.
Play Illinois too, yeah.
Especially because of this Texas game week 1, that I might, a month away from it, be leaning Texas. I still need to look more into that, but that's a Manning coming into your building. I'm going to take the narrow under at 10-2. Sayan's the X factor. If Sayan goes in and with those weapons, they're still elite offensively, which I probably shouldn't doubt considering all the great quarterbacks Ohio State's had the last 20 years. I probably shouldn't doubt him at all. I'm gonna ride the under line and go 10-2 again. But they're really good, and if they go 10-2, they're going to the playoff. I do think they are. There is a road where they can still win the Big Ten. I'm not going to take them to win the whole thing. I'm not going to do it. I just think there's too much youth, especially O-line and D-line.
Next year could be a year where they make a run.
27 could be a nasty year. That could really be where it's like, okay, Ohio State.
Or 2026, you mean, yeah.
6, yeah. I keep getting caught up on the draft.
The draft,
right. But 26 might be the year I pick them to win the title again. I'm not going to do it this year, but they very well could make the playoff.
I'm also not picking them to win the title. I'm also going under, but it's a 10-2 under. I'm not saying they're going to go 8-4 or 9-3. I'm saying they're going to go 10-2, but go under that win total. The Texas, Penn State, Michigan part of it, and I know Michigan's worse than both those schools, but that's just kind of the hang up for Ohio State right now. Those are the three I'm kind of worried about. I don't know if they're going to win 2 of those.
And I think what sits on me just a little bit, even more so than the players, because we knew they were loaded last year, they were losing a lot, is Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles were just as responsible for the turnaround and the playoff run as any of the players were. On both sides, making the adjustments schematically, what Chip Kelly did, especially in the run game, what Jim Knowles did messing around with a lot of his coverages, I think to lose that, and I'm not saying Hartline and Patricia can't be really good, but to lose those two guys.
That was the best coordinator pairing in the country, I think.
Absolutely. And now they're both gone and you're replacing them the same year. That's the part that gets me in those big moments, right? You got Jim Knowles coming back with Penn State to play at Ohio State, right? You've got to get through this Texas defense with Pete Kwiatkowski on that side. And Texas, other than Michigan, played the best defensive game last year against Ohio State. We're going to talk about a bunch of their games head-to-head when we get to the previews, but I think replacing both coordinators is also going to be a big factor here for Ohio State.
Yeah, both of us still probably think this is a playoff team next year and still a contender to win the Big Ten next year, but maybe not be a national championship level caliber team, but still be a really good team in college football. So soft under for both of us in the 10.5 win total. Next up, another team who was one of the best in college football last year was the Oregon Ducks. So they got beat by Ohio State in that quarterfinal game, got beat pretty badly in that Rose Bowl against the Buckeyes, but it was still a really successful year for Dan Lanning in 2024. They were a perfect 13-0 before that college football playoff quarterfinal game that included a Big Ten championship in their first year as a member of the Big Ten. They were also one of 2 teams to beat Ohio State last year, beating them in the regular season. Expectations are still very high for Dan Lanning heading into year 4. His program is really at the point where it's reloading, not rebuilding, like the elite programs do in college football. The defense is strong at every position, and the offense should be able to rely on a really good rushing attack thanks to transfer running back Mekhi Hughes and a really good offensive line, a top 5 offensive line in my opinion. More questions with the passing game right now, but Oregon should still be one of the top teams in the Big Ten once again. And Dalton, like I said before, that defense is loaded everywhere.
They absolutely are. I mean, you talk about playmakers at all 3 levels. Guys like Mateo Uiagalelei on the defensive line. You got one of my favorite players in the country in Bryce Betcher at linebacker. And then you get guys like Dylan Thieneman and Taron Johnson, who, even though they lost a ton of veteran experience in the secondary, they've got a lot coming in now, especially in the portal. You know me with Dylan Thieneman. I think he's the best single high safety in the country. I think Dan Lanning knows that, and that's why why he went and got him. If you wonder, okay, who's this safety from Purdue? If you haven't watched our show for the last year and a half, you'll know that we really like Dylan Thieneman, and him going to Oregon with Dan Lanning feels almost unfair. So it's a three-layered defense, and Dan Lanning, for as much as Oregon has always been known for their explosive offenses and all the points they put up, this defense and Dan Lanning is going to be the foundation of this team. What Lanning and Tosh Lupoi do with it on that side of the ball, especially with all the transfers on the back end, going to be a huge part of their success this season.
I rank the top 10 defenses in college football, which should be coming out soon on PFF.com. They're my number 6 defense in college football, one of 5 schools in America who was mentioned in my top 10 defensive line, top 10 linebacker unit, and top 10 secondary. Not really a true weakness on that side of the ball right now. There are some questions with this passing game, I will say right now, because Oregon has produced back-to-back Heisman finalists at quarterback in Bo Nix and Dylan Gabriel. I think it'll be an uphill battle for that to happen again in 2025. Now, of course, Dante Moore, immensely talented, right? He was the number 2 quarterback coming out of high school, only behind Arch Manning, a top 3 overall recruit in that 2023 high school class. But so far in his career, only a 57.6 PFF grade on 461 career snaps. Now, of course, most of that was his true freshman year at UCLA and not really a very good environment at UCLA. So it remains to be seen how he'll be at Oregon this year in a much better supporting cast. But the problem is, and the more concerning part, in my opinion, that wide receiver room took a big hit this offseason. Not only losing Tez Johnson to the NFL, but also Evan Stewart, their top receiver heading into 2025, is out for the season now with a torn patellar tendon in June. Now, you have a true freshman in Decorian Moore, who was the number 1 receiver coming out of high school, a top 5 overall recruit. But you're kind of asking him to be probably your number 1 receiver right now going into next year. Now, maybe he's as good as Jeremiah Smith, and maybe he's as good as Ryan Williams, and he could be that kind of guy for you. Still a lot of pressure to be putting on a true freshman wide receiver, too. So I have questions with that passing game right now, not only with Dante Moore, Dalton, but really with that wide receiver room right now.
Yeah, that's the part. And I like their offensive line, even with some of the guys that they lost. They got Isaiah World in there. They got Alex Harkey in there, Emmanuel Pregnant. I mean, I think they've got a pretty darn good offensive line.
It's top 5 for me in the country, yeah.
Yeah, they got a good offensive line that's going to be able to protect him, but especially with Evan Stewart going out. And I know, I wasn't always, thinking like, oh, he was the best receiver, but he was still the number 1 receiver coming into this year on this team.
And I was excited for Decorian Moore as the number 2 guy to maybe break out. Now you're like, hey, you got to be the number 1 guy immediately.
I mean, because you look at who else is going to step up. Obviously, we like Kenyon Sadiq at tight end, right? They got Malik Benson in from Florida State at receiver. But, yeah, I think you're really looking at this passing game this year more so than the last. We knew when they got Dylan Gabriel in last year, we're like, yeah, that works.
Tez Johnson and Evan Stewart.
That'll do. Yeah, right? We even Bo Nix going in 2 years ago after the first year was really good, and then he had the second incredible year as a Heisman finalist. But this is the first time in a while we don't know for sure with this passing game. They're going to run the ball. Their O-line's really good. I love Mekhi Hughes. I mean, absolutely. He was great at Tulane the last couple of years. If you haven't watched him, absolutely love him. Noah Whittington obviously is really good too. But that's going to be the big question, is Dante Moore and this passing game. And getting into Moore a little bit, let's go back to that 2023 season at UCLA, starting under Chip Kelly as a true freshman. And he kind of showed you everything a true freshman usually shows you. He shows you why he's talented. He's got a hose for an arm. I'll be honest with you, he can make every throw on the field. 94.1 deep passing grade that year was a top 15 mark in the country, and really good in Chip Kelly's play-action concepts. It's just the accuracy and the poise, and that was not a great offensive line he was playing behind at UCLA. Now he's got one in clean pockets. Can he make the throws that he needs to make to move the chains? That's really what you're talking about with Dante Moore. He's got a hose. He can throw it downfield, but a lot of times it's about hitting singles, especially in this offense. We saw it with Nix. We saw it with Gabriel. They don't turn the football over. They get first downs. They let the athletes do the things they need to do with yards after the catch, right? So I think Dante, he's talented. He's got a little experience. What, he makes 6 starts that year it was? I think it was. This is another one where you go, I feel like the Big Ten is a lot like this, other than maybe Penn State, where you just go, which quarterback's going to step up? Yeah. And Dante is squarely on that list. He's talented. We can sit here and tell you the talent is there, is the accuracy and the poise there in big moments.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what he could do. Like I said, he's immensely talented as a former 5-star, former top 5 overall recruit. But now you lose, a lot of wide receiver in Oregon. And yes, they have done a great job, Bo Nix and Dylan Gabriel, making them Heisman Trophy finalists and NFL quarterbacks too. But Dante Moore is probably more talented physically than maybe both those guys, honestly. Bo Nix is close.
Nix has an underrated arm for sure.
Yeah.
He showed that with Denver last year. But Moore, that's what I will say is if Moore is clean back there and he can step into it, he's got a hose.
Yeah,
He
exactly.
does.
So there's a lot of potential there, but the receiving core is what worries me a little bit with Oregon right now. Still a lot of talented players in the receiving core, but we'll see for them next year. But they should be able to rely a lot on the run game. And Mekhi Hughes, 2 outstanding years at Tulane. He was the number 1 running back in the portal this offseason, in my opinion, too. 1,982 rushing yards after contact over his first 2 years of college football. The only 2 running backs who had more were Ashton Jeanty and Amarian Hampton, who were first-round picks in the 2025 NFL Draft. Almost 2,800 rushing yards over the last 2 years, the most of any returning back in the country by nearly 500 yards. 92.2 career PFF grade, second among returning FBS running backs too. Not much of his receiver, less than 250 career receiving yards, and he'll need to take it up a notch in the Big Ten too. But there's no denying he's right now a top 5-ish running back in college football going into next year, and a guy that Oregon is going to really, really rely on that offense.
I think the receiving production can be added into his game because it's just not something they did at Tulane very often anyway. I don't know that's as much on him as it is their system. But no, Hughes is a guy that I just love the way he runs the football. He's so fundamentally sound. He's tough. He reminds me, Hughes won't be a first-round pick because running backs, you got to be real special to go in the first round now. But he reminds me of a guy who went in the first round a long time ago. That's Thomas Jones back in the day for the Chicago Bears. Me as a New York Jets fan watching him in the late 2002. It just reminds me of Thomas Jones. Vision, power, ability to fight through contact and always be leaning forward when he's finishing runs. I mean, Mekhi Hughes, you talk about a back that's going to keep you on schedule. That's really what he is, and that's what Will Stein's going to want in this offense.
And with the top 5 offensive line blocking for him too, it should be great for Oregon next year, that run game. Dawn, maybe your favorite player in the country, though, is up here for a defensive player spotlight.
He's up there. The last 2 years he spent at Purdue, he was really darn good, especially his freshman season. Dylan Thieneman coming in as a free safety in this defense. To me, it almost feels unfair. And there was a drop-off in his grades last year at Purdue because they weren't using him quite in that single high role as much. He played over 86% of his snaps at free safety in that system in 2023. That dropped down to 57% last year. Now, honestly, the grade was lower, but it comes out, I think it was against Notre Dame and somebody else that he just had like 2 really bad games that dragged it down. Dylan Thieneman's one of the elite safeties in college football, and I really think even more so than Caleb Downs, I think he's the best single high safety in the country. Yeah. I really do. I think if Oregon wants to get in some man-to-man scenarios on the outside and just have Thieneman back there as a center fielder, I have no issue with that. He's incredibly fast. He's really aggressive. He gets to the football. He's everything to me you could want in a single high free safety. He's going to be great in this defense.
Yeah, 80-plus grades in coverage and run defense over the last 2 years. I think it was criminal what Purdue did to him last year and how they utilized him. He's one of the best center fielders in college football, and Purdue rarely used him in that role last year. Dan Lanning, who's one of the most brilliant defensive minds in the country, probably knows how to use that kind of speed and range and ball skills in his defense. I'm excited to see what Dylan Thieneman can do in that defense in 2025. We've got Trevor in the chat right now saying Buccaneer legend Thomas Jones.
No, yeah, Buccaneers too. That's a good call. Yeah, I forgot. I remember always the Bears and the Jets. I forget Tampa Bay also. Yeah, that's where I'm at with Mekhi Hughes. I mean, fundamentally sound and tough and keeps you on schedule. Back in the day, like Thomas Jones did, that's something that would get you taken in the first round. I don't think he has the home run speed to get taken that high, but I absolutely love Mekhi Hughes. He just, you know what it is with him, especially with the workload he had at Tulane. He's a guy you appreciate when you watch him down to down to down. He's getting 25, 30 carries down there in that big 12 personnel offense at Tulane, and he just keeps coming at you. I think it's going to be the same idea here with Oregon.
All right, over under 10.5, a lot like Ohio State. Are you going over or under right now? This is a tough one.
This is a hard one.
Because I can go first if you want. Because
go ahead.
I'm taking the soft over. There's a lot of things that worry me about Oregon next year. But you look at that schedule, they're at Penn State. I think they'll probably lose that game. They play Indiana. That's at home, too. But they're coming off a bye for that Indiana game. I look at that schedule. They should win every other game, probably pretty easily. So even though I have a lot of questions with Oregon, I don't think they're a national title contender. Or they are a national title contender, but I don't think they're in the inner circle for next year. I'm going over, which is weird considering how I'm not as high on Oregon as I was last year, but I still think with that schedule they can go 11-1.
They certainly can.
I'm going soft over.
And it's so much on Dante, too.
Yeah.
It's everything is about Dante Moore. If Dante Moore is good, I mean, they could mess around and go to Penn State and win a game, right? They're talented enough. If Dante Moore is really good,
I mean, they're 12-0 last year.
If he's anything close to the last two they've had, they go 12-0 again.
My schedule's manageable, man. I was prepared when we went into this preview. Before I even looked at the schedule, I was like, I'm going to pick the under for Oregon because I just have so many questions. And then I looked at the schedule, I'm like, I can't pick the under. I can't do it. I'm going over. It's a soft one because again, losing 2 games is all it takes to go under.
It's the part of college football that's fun. It's just assuming the favorite's going to win every week.
Yeah.
Also, and it's also when your biggest question is your quarterback.
Yeah.
But they can
not even the quarterback is the weapons too, man. Is what I'm more worried about.
It's all of that. But it's not like we don't have, other than Ohio State, we have questions, and maybe Indiana, we have questions about everybody's weapons here. So, man, it's kind of tough.
Yeah.
Are we getting Oregon, Penn State again? Is that what we're doing?
I was prepped to take the under, and then I just can't. I can't do it with that schedule.
Yeah, because I know they can. We know they can run the ball, and we know they can play defense.
Yeah.
Darn it. Yeah, I think I'm with you. I think this might be an 11-1. And who's to say they don't go out to Penn State?
Are they a national title contender, though? That's the question I'm asking right now.
It's all on Dante. I'm going to say no.
Yeah.
Because if they couldn't do it with last year's offense, they might get just as far as they did last year.
Yeah.
And getting to and winning the Big Ten title game again, it's all on Dante. Because I see the scenario where you go, if you have major questions in your passing game, you could lose 2 games just to lose them. Mm-hmm. maybe USC just outscores you one day or something, or Iowa shuts you down one day up front. I mean, these things can happen. I'll ride the over with you. Even Indiana. If Dante Moore is struggling, and let's say they're coming off a loss to Penn State, and then they got to play Indiana and their defense.
At least you have a week off in between that, though.
At least you have that, but who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot that can go wrong. Oh, man, I'm like convincing myself out of this.
Take the under.
Yeah.
You going under?
It's Dante. Sure, I'll do it just to argue with you on it. I'm gonna go. They'll still be. I'm still gonna go with a 9-10 win range. It's still gonna be really good, but I need to see if Dante goes out there and they go 11-1 or 12-0. He might be in a Heisman race like the last 2
Yeah.
were. I mean, that's the only thing for me is I go.
Too.
Are we? I mean, Hughes could be as well.
Here.
Yeah, I'm going to sneak it under. I'm going to do the same thing I did to Ohio State and go, they'll probably win 10. Because a lot of things could go wrong in a football season. That's just how,
sure.
Especially if your questions are at quarterback and receiver, that's tight.
All right, next up is another really talented team who might be the favorite to win the Big Ten right now. That is the Penn State Nittany Lions. James Franklin had his best year yet as Penn State's head coach in year 11 with the Nittany Lions. They went 13-3, made it all the way to the college football playoff semifinals before losing to Notre Dame in a heartbreaking game. It was Penn State's first top 5 finish under James Franklin, and also the first one for the program in 19 years. Now, of course, they lost 2 absolute superstars and 2 top 15 picks in edge rusher Abdul Carter and tight end Tyler Warren, but the nucleus of last year's team is pretty much still intact. It's really hard to find really any glaring holes on this roster right now, and there's really enough star power for Penn State to compete at the top of the sport and compete for the program's first national title in really 40 years, Dalton, for this team.
Absolutely. I mean, you've got a boatload of talent coming back. Again, we've talked about this before, but the first thing you look at is what's coming back. They've got darn near everything, basically, except for Abdul Carter and Tyler Warren. This is basically the same team as now. Those are your 2 best football players, and they both went in the top 15 of the draft. Obviously, I think they're actually going to have a harder time replacing Warren, considering everything he did for him, and he was the center of that offense. But got a whole new receiving core in there. We're gonna work on that, right? Obviously, you've got guys like Kyron Hudson and Trevor Pena. I know your favorite player, but I think that's really what you're looking at is a team with basically that was in the Final Four last year, and you just don't have Abdul Carter and Tyler Warren.
Yeah.
And if everything else gets better around, the rest, the players, everybody that was around those 2 guys last year, you've got a team, especially if the receiving core is solid or better than it's been, then you have a national title contender.
Mm-hmm. 7 Penn State players made the top 10 of our top 10 position units, position rank, I should say, second most of any school in the country. The only position unit ranking where Penn State wasn't at least mentioned in our top 10 or honorable mention was their linebacker unit. and that would have been a top 15 unit if we extended it by more than one school. So continuity from a Final Four team is really the biggest strength of this team last year. Question mark is, will the transfers at wide receiver finally be the answer for this program? Because it's no secret, wide receiver has held this program back in recent years. In fact, no Penn State wide receiver caught a pass in that semifinal loss to Notre Dame. Not a single wide receiver for Penn State caught a pass in that game. And now you lose easily your top weapon from that receiving core in Tyler Warren, now to the Indianapolis Colts. It could be an even bigger problem if the 3 transfers that Penn State brought in at wide receiver don't hit. But Dalton, like I said before, I'm really high on all 3 of those guys. Devontae Ross coming in from Troy, Trevor Pena from Syracuse, Kyron Hudson from USC. They did a great job of addressing receiver in the portal. But the question is, can those 3 transfers hit? Because if they can't, that passing game, which struggled at times last year, could struggle even more without Tyler Warren.
And you know me, I think Andy Kotelnicki's arguably the best offensive play caller in the country. And he even at Kansas, he always got a receiving chorus to punch above their weight class, right? Now, what I do like about those 3 guys you just mentioned is they are all very, very different,
yes.
right? Kyron Hudson's a big-bodied contested catch guy. Devontae Ross is the speed threat that you want, like they had in Wallace and Evans last year. But and then Trevor Pena is the crafty slot receiver that I think Aller should be looking for in a lot of those 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6 type situations, right? So, and we'll see what they have at tight end too. You've got Khalil Dinkins, who's obviously a veteran. You got Luke Reynolds, who they're really excited about behind the scenes as far as his receiving ability. So
they brought in a top 5 tight end coming out of high school in 3 straight years.
It's one of the schools. I know Iowa's considered tight end U, but Penn State's not far behind them. They're going to have talent there at tight end. And again, I think the X factor of Kotelnicki as a play caller and understanding how to optimize his talent. Before last year, wasn't a whole lot of people that heard of Tyler Warren.
Yeah.
Right? He was kind of a role player. He was one of the tight ends in the room. And then, Kotelnicki gets on campus and he's like, that guy's a freak.
Yeah.
Who's to say he won't do that this year with somebody in a different way? I think that's the part of the creativity of this offense that can really help you. On top of the fact that we haven't mentioned it yet, the best running back duo in the country.
Yes.
You can run the ball really well to set all that
good
up.
Offensive line, yeah.
And Andy's a master of play action, too.
You have a great running back unit, a good offensive line, which should be an improved receiving core, at least at wide receiver, and Dalton, a top 5 quarterback in America and the best one in the Big Ten in Drew Aller.
Absolutely. I think, look, Drew Aller gets a lot of heat. And, yeah, I get it. He deserved it. He didn't play well against Notre Dame. But also that Notre Dame team that they played in the college football playoff semifinal, that was the worst possible matchup for them. That's like the one team in the country that Penn State did not want to play. You were there. Didn't have a wide receiver catch a single pass, right? But either way, let's get in on Drew Aller. Drew Aller's got an absolute rifle. He's built like an NFL quarterback. Throws it down the middle of the field especially really well. I want to throw you some numbers here on seam routes. Last year, led the nation in completions, yards, and touchdowns, and he had a 94.8 passing grade. He and Andy Kotelnicki like to attack down the middle of the field, especially when defenses when they have those seams exposed with those single high defenses, because you have to come up and stop the run with 8 in a box. If you don't do that, then you're going to get run all over. So Aller has an idea of how to attack the seams of a defense down the middle. He also, for as big an arm as he has, is elite with his ball security. Even last year when he was getting more aggressive, only a 2.1% turnover-worthy play rate, top 20 mark in the country. Over the last 2 years, he has the 3rd lowest turnover-worthy play rate in the country. Drew Aller, for as much as people rip him, and his footwork sometimes isn't great, and the accuracy outside the numbers isn't always great, Drew Aller gives you an incredibly high floor for success. Now, again, not great when throwing at or outside the numbers. His passing grade drops by more than 20 points, and throwing through man coverage is an issue, right? So when you're talking about those 2 things, again, needs a little bit of help. Hopefully this set of wide receivers can separate better than the last ones. If he can do that, and if they do that, then you're talking about maybe even the national title favorite, right? But they have to play better against those teams that are going to play man coverage against them. Notre Dame was the best man coverage team in the country last year, and they still almost found a way to beat them. So Aller, with the 2 years of starting experience, he gives you such a high floor because he doesn't turn the football over, and man, oh man, can he sling the ball down the middle of the field.
Absolutely. He's a phenomenal quarterback, and we were trying to tell you guys last year when he was getting a lot of hate for last year, he was not the problem with Penn State's offense. He proved it this past year. Now he's entering his senior year as, again, one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the country. And also a top 5 running back in the country he has there, too, and Nick Singleton, who we're spotlighting right here. Really surprised a lot of people when he returned to school for another year because he could have been probably a day 2 pick in the 2025 NFL draft if he declared, but he's back for another year. Is now the number 3 running back returning to college football. Over 1,100 rushing yards in 2024 were third among all returning Power 4 backs. 6.4 yards per carry were 8th in the Power 4. Only Jeremiah Love was the most valuable running back in the country last year among returning running backs. Singleton's second on that list, right? So Nick Singleton is a phenomenal player, really dynamic receiver out of the backfield too. 682 receiving yards over the last 2 years, 5th most among all running backs in the country in that span, and the most among returning running backs in the Power 4. 7 receiving touchdowns, tied for the most in the country over the last 2 years. Great size for the position at 6'1", 226 pounds, and the speed to house it from anywhere on the field. He's the lightning in the backfield. Kaytron Allen is the thunder in the backfield. And together, I know it's kind of a hot take, but I do think it's the best running back unit in the country entering next year.
2 guys who had over 1,000 yards last year, and 2 guys who do it in different ways. Singleton, again, with the speed, and he's the dynamic receiver between the two, kind of the one-cut zone back, and then Andy Kotelnicki can get into a lot of the gap and power schemes with Kaytron Allen running between the tackles. He's actually, I think Allen, between the two of them, for me, has better vision between the two of them. He just doesn't have the feet that Singleton has, but the fact that they bring in 2 different styles also is fantastic.
And 2 of them, I believe, are among the top 10 all-time leading rushers in Penn State history, and I believe both of them are only like 1,000 yards away from the all-time record set by Evan Royster. So both of them could be the 2 all-time leading rushers by Penn State if they have another 1,000 yards.
And there's still, no matter what weapons they have, and even Aller at quarterback, they want to run the football. That's the base of their offense. And the ideal scenario in there, and this isn't a knock on Aller by any means, but the ideal scenario in this offense for Kotelnicki is that Aller throws the ball 25 times, maybe 30,
and that's why I don't love the Drew Aller Heisman hype right now, because I'm like, I don't know if he's going to have enough opportunity.
No,
to put up the numbers.
I don't think he would. And
nothing against him either.
It's not his ability. I wouldn't pick Aller for Heisman because he's not going to throw for 5,000 yards. They don't want to do that. If he has to do that, they're going to have an issue. That's really, they want to run the ball and play Penn State football and do it just while they have a good quarterback.
Surface level, I get it, because he's a top 5 quarterback in the country playing for a national title contending team. But that's not the way this offense is designed.
At the end of the year, when's the last time a quarterback won a Heisman with, I don't know, 24 touchdowns and 4 picks? Just not. It's just not. The numbers aren't going to be there for that. I mean, it's great if you want to bet on it, feel free. But it's just the style of offense. Ideally, he's throwing less than 30 times a game.
Absolutely. But who is the star defensive player, Dalton, on this team right now?
Well, there's so many guys we can pick, right? I mean, they're loaded at every unit. They've got A.J. Harris. They've got Denai Dennis. So let's talk about an interior pass rusher. And Zane Durant, look, 6'1", about 290 pounds, kind of an undersized defensive tackle, but he makes it happen inside with athleticism, right, and quickness, and he gets into the backfield. He shoots gaps. He's a problem to try to block one-on-one because of his athleticism and his leverage. 14 tackles for loss or no gain last season, most among any defensive tackle in the country. 28 pressures last year, was top 25 in the country. You're just talking about a guy whose quickness is a real problem. It comes from that kind of Kalijah Cansey school of like, look, I know I'm small. Even Aaron Donald was like this. I know I'm small, but I'm gonna out-athlete you on the inside. I'm gonna use quickness and hand usage in there to make plays, especially shooting gaps and getting to quarterbacks. So I think, we'll see what Jim Knowles does and how creative he gets with this defense. But you remember last year, the most success at Ohio, and he would blitz if he needed to, but it was really a dynamic 4-man rush. Zane Durant from the interior is the biggest problem you're dealing with this Penn State pass rush.
Yeah, my number 2 returning D tackle in college football heading into next year. All right, Dalton, win total once again, like Ohio State and Oregon, is set at 10.5 right now. You're taking the over-under for that, and where do you rank this team right now? Are they in the inner circle for national championship contenders?
I'm going to take the over because I think they have to.
Yeah.
I mean, what you're talking about when you're taking this over is take care of business and beat either Oregon or Ohio State. Yeah. They could be good enough to do both.
Yeah.
Right? I think they are inner circle top 4 or 5 contender for a national title. The wide receiver thing is a huge question. Right? That's the number. They're either going to be, it's either the receivers are going to let them down and they're going to be roughly the same as last year and they'll still probably be a top 8 team in the country, or those 3 receivers make the whole difference and Aller takes another step and they win the whole thing.
Yeah. It's
going to be one of ththose 2 things. And I'm for the regular season, I'm taking over 10.5 because it feels like the pressure is on for Aller, for James Franklin, for everybody. I think they have to. And to ask them, okay, hey, win one of those 2 big games. If they don't do that, then they're going to get a lot of heat.
And they host, I will say, one of those big 2 games. Oregon at Penn State, night game whiteout.
And they didn't make it Big Noon. They didn't give Oregon the Big Noon.
They made it a whiteout night game. Listen, I know I'm not trying to sound like a homer here, but I've been a Penn State fan my entire life. Recently, Big Noon has kind of ruined whiteout a little bit because the whiteout was always the biggest game of the year at home. Big Noon, making it the biggest games at noon, it was always, okay, what game could we put at night? Whiteout's been still great, but not as big. Oregon is a whiteout game.
Well, and the numbers showed last year, both in the ACC and Big Ten, especially those coast-to-coast trips.
Yeah,
not easy, not easy at all. The numbers were not great for the road teams in those games, so it's going to be a tough task for Oregon to go in there, especially now in that. And I didn't know that
environment.
I assumed it was at noon, which still would have been tough because for Oregon it's 9 a.m.
But great for us because we could maybe go to that game. Now we can't go to the night game, unfortunately.
I mean, it would have been rowdy for sure. But no, I've got to take the over here on Penn State. It just feels like this is the year. Yeah. I know last year felt like the year they got to the Final Four and they didn't even win. Keep in mind too, they didn't even win the Big Ten last year. No. Oregon won the Big Ten, so I think a lot of people have Penn State as the favorite. I'm taking this over because it feels like they have to. They need to win the Big Ten at the very least this year and make a real run at it. This is the year.
It would be a big disappointment if they went 10-2 this year. I'll say that. Now, of course, if it went 10-2, they'll still make the playoff, and who knows what happens from there. Like Ohio State, honestly, too. But I think this is Penn State. I'm picking Penn State to win the Big Ten this year. I'm picking them to win the Big Ten, and I think this is a great chance Penn State has to win the program's first national title in nearly 40 years. Are you picking Penn State to win the Big Ten this year, too? Or you decided that yet, or no?
I'm undecided.
Okay, we can wait.
Because beating Ohio State is such a big hurdle for them.
Yeah.
Is it 2016 was the last time they did it? Were you at that game?
No, I missed it. I had to. That was the Marcus Allen blocked field goal return for a touchdown by Grant Haley. I missed that game.
I'm undecided on this still, and it might take some adjusting in season because beating Ohio State's the big hurdle because I think there's a chance they're going to have to do it at least once, whether it's in Columbus or in Indianapolis.
Beat Oregon, too. That's another one.
Yeah.
And they're going to have to beat probably one of both those teams twice. So
at some point, they're going to have to beat them both probably to do it.
All right, I'll pick a Penn State to win the Big Ten. Have not disclosed whether or not they're going to win the national title. I'll make that prediction later on this offseason. But Penn State is absolutely in the inner circle of national title contenders going into next year. Next up is the Purdue Boilermakers, who had the worst record in the Power Four last year at 1-11. Nothing went right for the Boilermakers. They had the worst defense in the country in terms of EPA per play, fifth worst offense in the country in terms of EPA per play. 5-19 record across 2 years for their head coach, Ryan Walters. He was fired, and they brought in Barry Odom, the UNLV head coach right there, you see, as his replacement. Great job at UNLV. He led the Rebels to an 11-3 record and a top 25 finish in the AP poll this past year. In fact, it was the first time in program history that UNLV was ever ranked in the top 25. I actually never even knew that before I looked it up. UNLV was never ranked in the top 25 at any point in the season until this past year with Barry Odom leading them. He really has to rebuild this program, though, from the ground up right now, and he has a good stable of running backs to rely on, Dalton.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think when you talk about having Devin Mockabee as one of the holdovers, one of the very few holdovers for this team that he decided to stay, and Barry Odom decided to keep him along with the wave of transfers he brought in, that's a big advantage. And then Malachi Thomas transferring in as well. This team, and we're going to talk about a wide open quarterback battle where you're probably going to see multiple guys this year playing anyway. I think the fact that they at least have some hope for running the ball at Purdue. Really, that's what you hope for on offense is that they can get the ground game and a little bit of ball. And they ran the ball. Barry Odom's team at UNLV ran the ball terrific last year with Jaden Thomas and Haj Malik Williams and those guys. So that's what you're trying to emulate there, a good running game on the offensive side.
Yeah, Mockabee was their leading rusher in each of the last 3 years, and they brought in a really good transfer in Malachi Thomas from Virginia Tech. He had 75-plus rushing grade in each of the last 2 years there, too. So good running game. Question is, how much will this defense improve, though? They had the worst defense in the country last year, only brought back one of the 18 defensive players who played 200 snaps for Purdue last year. So they have a lot of incoming transfers. They'll need those guys to step up to significantly improve this unit. But really, none of those incoming transfers were really stars at their previous schools either. So still a lot of question marks for a defense that was already the worst in the country last year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, they're really, when you talk about this on both sides of the ball, but especially on the defensive side, being such a rebuild and the amount of points they gave up last year under Ryan Walters.
With Dylan Thieneman, too.
With Dylan Thieneman. I mean, they lost Nick Scorton the year before. It's really gotten torn apart the last couple of years. So you're really looking at a team that again, they're rebuilding, no question about it. And on the defensive side, they're going to have to improve that. Again, the same thing. He built a pretty good defense at UNLV. It's going to take time.
Yeah,
I think on that side of the ball for sure.
Who is the current favorite to win the quarterback job? What should we know about him?
Max, I have no idea. That's really where we're at. You have Ryan Brown, who made 2 starts for them last year, who transferred to North Carolina for the spring and then came back and maybe is the favorite as the incumbent. Bennett Meredith is another guy who was with the program last year. Evans Chuba was a backup at Washington State last year. Malachi Singleton was a backup at Arkansas last year. At the end of the day, I have notes on Brown because he played a couple of games for him. He's a solid athlete, good runner. He played a really good game actually against Illinois last year, a memorable high-scoring game that Illinois just squeaked out. But at the end of the day, this is maybe the most wide-open quarterback competition in the country. There's legitimately 4 guys who have a shot at it. I'm making the assumption that maybe Brown, because he was already in the program, is the favorite, but also he wasn't in the program under Odom. None of these guys were, so it's as wide open as it gets right now as far as this quarterback situation.
Yeah, wide open quarterback battle right now, which means they should rely on Devin Mockabee once again for probably the 4th year in a row. He's going to be the leading rusher for Purdue in that program. He's been a really incredibly difficult player to bring down in his career. He forced a missed tackle on 30% of his carries in 2024, tied for 10th among all Power 4 running backs, averaged nearly 3.5 yards after contact per attempt, which were 8th among Big Ten running backs. Got to get better as a receiver, only a 59.7 receiving grade last year, but obviously not a great quarterback situation either last year. He's an explosive player, though, who will be the bell cow for the Boilermakers once again as a redshirt senior. It's kind of rare for a running back to lead a program in rushing yards 4 years in a row, but Devin Mockabee should do that again for Purdue.
Yeah, oh, for sure. I mean, he's been the one offensive constant, especially last year for them. I mean, it's absolutely, he's going to get enough chances, and props to him for working through contact and forcing all those missed tackles in an offense that doesn't have much support for him in the passing game. So he's certainly a tough player you like to have in your backfield.
We didn't even mention it, but Max Clare, their top weapon last year, is now at Ohio State. So you lose your top weapon in tight end, who's a top 5 tight end in the country. He's gone too. So Devin Mockabee is going to be the bell cow for Purdue next year.
Absolutely.
Who's the top defensive player for this team?
Yeah, I think the story for this defense and changing from a defense that last year ran a boatload of man coverage is just you have some secondary transfers, right? A guy like Tony Grimes coming over with Barry Odom from UNLV, and even a guy like Crew Wackley, the safety from BYU, who was a solid player for them, 70-plus grades in coverage and in run defense last year, one of 7 Big 12 safeties to do that. Didn't get a ton of snaps last year, was kind of more of a rotational player for BYU, but a solid player to build around, right? And I think that's just the idea that Barry Odom is looking for. He's just looking for guys who want an opportunity, who are going to play hard and well-rounded football players. Wackley can be one of those guys. Again, I think Grimes is another one. You're going to see, I mean, this team is built on transfers, and especially this defense on the back end. Right now, 6 of their 7 starters in the back 7 of their defense are transfers.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're just looking at a team that's trying to find any way to build and be competitive this year with their long-term vision in mind.
Yeah, it should be 7 transfers total starting for Purdue on the defense next year, which is needed considering how bad the defense was last year. Dalton, the win total set at 3.5 right now, so they're expecting improvement from Purdue from a 1-11 record, again, the worst in the Power 4 last year. How much will they improve, though, and what's the bottom line for Purdue?
I think they're going under that.
Yeah, same.
They need time. This is a program that over the last couple years has just very slowly hit rock bottom, and last year was rock bottom, only winning 1 game and really getting dominated most weeks. I just don't see, as they currently are with, again, there's 4 players vying for the quarterback spot. There's a ton of holes all over the place. They lost their best offensive player. They lost their best defensive player. I think Barry Odom was the right guy to hire. I think he can build that the same way he did at UNLV. It's going to take some time. I think this is really a development year for the entire program. I'm going under that 3.5.
Yeah, I'm going under 3.5 too. Listen, he did a great job rebuilding UNLV, which wasn't really a great program before him, and then got ranked for the first time ever under him. Maybe he could have similar success at Purdue, but it's going to take some time at Purdue, though, and they should not expect to make a bowl game in 2025, and I'm even taking the under on that 3.5 win total, too. I see a couple games they should win early on, Ball State and then Southern Illinois, but after that, you got out-of-conference game at Notre Dame. That's brutal. That could have been another. Yeah. That could have been one game they try to win. Northwestern could be a winnable game, too, but I mean, that's 3. I just don't know with the other 9 games what game they're going to win, right? So it's it's tough for Purdue next year. And again, should be still a rough year for the Boilermakers, but again, a great hire in Barry Odom. I'm a big fan of that hire. Just give him some time to rebuild that program because it really is starting from the ground up at Purdue right now. Next up is the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, who, listen, Greg Schiano, he rebuilt that program at Rutgers.
Twice.
Really twice. Took him a few years in his second stint at Rutgers, but he has now had the program consistently performing at a solid level. The Scarlet Knights had their second straight 7-6 season, the first time they've had back-to-back winning years since 2011 and 2012, and 2011 was the final year for Greg Schiano as their head coach before he left to take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers head coaching job. Now he's back at Rutgers in his second stint with them. They really upgraded their underperforming defense in the transfer portal, especially at edge rusher, but they did lose a superstar running back in Kyle Monungai. But again, pretty good receiving core in the conference too that they have for Ethan Kaliak-Manis. But Dalton, that edge group they got now coming into that program is pretty fantastic.
And a couple of transfers and a couple of really good transfers from two really good defenses. Eric O'Neill coming in from James Madison and Bradley Weaver from Ohio. Greg Schiano loves big, rough, physical football. He loves defense and defensive lines, and he's had some even good history in the secondary. But man, oh man, when you look at this pair of transfers, especially Eric O'Neill, love him. And a great story too. We're going to get into him more in a little bit. But he's a kid from Staten Island. Played at Long Island his first 3 years. Goes out to James Madison now back in Jersey at Rutgers, all of 20 miles from where he played high school football.
Love
right?
That.
So great story. And I was just talking. We were talking to Trevor about this earlier in the last week or so. He's just solid. Does he give you that same feel like Jack Sawyer gives you? It's kind of that thing. We'll talk about. He's big and strong, and he does everything off the edge you need to. But O'Neill and Weaver, I'll tell you what, this defensive line is going to give Rutgers opponents some issues.
They were two of the 25 highest-graded edge rushers in the country last year. And, of course, both of them are doing it at the Group of 5 level, now going to do it at the Big Ten level. But I'm a big fan of both those guys, man. So now coming into that Rutgers defense should be really good. Question mark is behind them at linebacker, I think is really the weakness for Rutgers right now. No linebacker for Rutgers had over a 65.1 PFF grade in 2024. And the second level of that defense was the major reason why Rutgers had the Power 4 second worst defense in terms of EPA per run last year. So I think linebacker is probably the biggest weakness for Rutgers right now, which, again, is a problem for the team. They got to address it, but it's not that big of an issue, right? We've seen some other teams that we previewed already saying, oh, okay, this is a major issue for them. Linebacker's a slight issue for this Rutgers program right now.
And what can make their linebacker unit a lot better is this defensive line full of transfers making their lives easier and creating space for them. That's always something that, doesn't get thought about enough sometimes is, did this defensive line create enough space for them to operate and get to the football, right? I think this unit that they've brought in, they can do that, right? So maybe it's a weakness on paper, but if the D-line is improved, especially with those two edge guys, then you're talking about funneling things back into them and making their lives easier.
That's exactly. It's one position actually in football where it's kind of easy to adjust the grades based off how good the surrounding pieces are on the defense. So I think linebackers, with that defensive line could be a lot better next year, but we'll see for 2025. Dalton, let's talk more about the quarterback and Ethan Kaliak-Manis going to another year as a starting quarterback at Rutgers.
Yeah, so he was much better last year than he was the previous year starting at Minnesota, and he got better throwing balls into the intermediate range off of play action, and even at times he's always been kind of a specialist when it comes to throwing those go balls down the sideline. Those have always been his favorite, whether he's at Minnesota or at Rutgers. He's a guy, big, tall pocket passer who can attack vertically downfield. He's got a really good arm, and I think the thing with him, it's just going to sound funky, really, but sometimes you just have to say it. It just needs to complete more passes, right? I mean, a 53.8% completion percentage, second lowest among FBS quarterbacks with at least 300 dropbacks last year. It's just the inconsistent accuracy and the inability to do a whole lot under pressure, and still had 19 turnover-worthy plays last year. Now, you look at it and you go, okay, he only threw 7 interceptions. He had 9 potential interceptions dropped last year, tied for third most in the country. So you're talking about a guy who sometimes still puts the ball in danger, but he did improve last year, especially on the vertical throws, especially in the intermediate throws, some of those deep crossers and things like that. I just think it's about consistency with Kaliak-Manis and which guy you're going to get week to week. There's a really good version of him that's a really good vertical passer that can open up this offense. I think when you're talking about guys like Ian Strong and DT Sheffield at receiver, he can take advantage of the speed and the bodies that they have out there. He just needs to be more consistent, especially underneath, and he's got to not put the ball in danger so much because he'd be a guy I'm looking at with his turnover-worthy play rates. That interception total could rise if he's not a little safer with the football.
Yeah, I love the receiving core they have, though. I mean, Ian Strong, DT Sheffield, even Colin Weber coming in, too, from the transfer portal at tight end.
But he's from Charlotte, right? Yeah, he's a good player, too.
Yeah, I love that receiving core Rutgers is building. It was almost the biggest strength of the team, honestly, if it wasn't for the edge rushers. And one of those players is Ian Strong, and that receiving core right now lives up to his last name. He's 6'3", 215 pounds, the second most contested catches of any wide receiver in the country last year with 20 contested grabs. Only dropped 2 of his catchable targets last year. He is a physical player. He refuses to be jammed at the line of scrimmage. A physical route runner, physical at the catch point. I just love watching Ian Strong's game, and he is one of the strongest receivers, ironically, in college football.
Yeah, no, absolutely. To have a big-bodied guy like that, especially a guy for like Calic Menace, who's not as precise with his accuracy, to have someone you can throw it up to, especially on the go routes, because he does throw a nice go ball down the sideline and just go, hey, man, go up and get it.
Yeah.
That's a really good player to have on the outside. And, again, I think that receiving core could be a strength for them as a unit.
Definitely. Who is the star defensive player for Rutgers?
So a guy we've been talking about, I'm going to go with Eric O'Neill, the transfer edge defender from James Madison. And you're looking at a guy, look, he's 6'4", he's 255, 260. He's really strong. He can reduce inside and play the run. And over the last 3 years, whether it's at Long Island at the FCS level or James Madison at the Group of 5 level, he's been one of the most productive pass rushers in the country. And Max, this past year, again, it's the pass rush, which is fantastic, but the run defense also 84, at least an 84 grade in run defense and the pass rush this past year. One of just 5 edge defenders to do that. I believe the other 4 were James Pierce Jr., Josh Josephs, also for Tennessee.
Jack Sawyer, probably?
Nope, he just missed. He had like an 82 or something in run defense. It was James Pierce Jr., Josh Josephs, Mike Green from Marshall, and Jalen McLeod, who was really good and moved to linebacker in the draft out of Auburn. But those are the only other 4 players, and Mike Green was the only other Group of 5 guy in that. So when you're talking about the production that Eric O'Neill has put on tape, man, oh man, it doesn't get much better than him the last 3 years. Now he's going to prove he can do it at the Power 5 level. But again, I think he gives me a similar, maybe a little more hand-in-the-dirt Jack Sawyer kind of vibe, but he's a really good two-way player and somebody you should not underestimate just because, and we've seen it, I know it was at Indiana and they had the same coach, but what they teach him on defense down there at James Madison, they're getting it right. I think O'Neill's going to come up to Rutgers and be really good.
He dominated at the FCS level at Long Island, dominated the Group of 5 level at James Madison, and now tries to dominate at the Big Ten level with Rutgers going into next year. Dalton, their win total right now is set at 5.5. So basically, with the 5th hardest schedule in the country, according to our power rankings, will Rutgers make a bowl game in 2025?
I think they're going to find a way to do it. I think so. It feels like that at least that 6-7 win range, they always find a way to do it when Greg Schiano's the coach, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, he has a culture in that program. They got to figure it out at running back, but they have C.J. Campbell, who was, I believe he was FAU's leading rusher last year, coming in to replace Monungai. I know Monungai was a star in the engine of that offense, but I think they've got a solid defense. They've got a good receiving core. Schiano's got the right culture. I don't see any reason not to pick them to at least make a bowl game. They do it all the time under Schiano. And the brand of football they play just plays up.
Yeah. I'm counting it up right now. 4, 5. Yeah, they should probably make a bowl game.
1 or 2 of those 50-50 games has got to go their way.
Yeah, I'll take the over. It's a slight over. 6-6 is probably what I'll say. But it is a hard schedule. They have Oregon. They got Ohio State. They got Penn State. Washington at Washington. It's a cross-country trip, too. Yep. Iowa is always tough. Illinois. I didn't mention that. They play Illinois, too. That's close, man. That's tight.
You know what? Even I'll say this with Illinois: mess around and get the pass rush going in that game. Mm-hmm. You never know. I just think the way Schiano twice now has run that program, I think you take Rutgers to make a bowl game. I'm in on that.
Yeah, I'll do it. 6-6, I'll say, for the Rutgers Scarlet Knights going into next year. Defense should be playing at a higher level in 2024 with many new pieces, and they have so much talent offensively, I think, too, in that receiving core to make their 3rd straight bowl game. So I'll say it. All right, next up is UCLA in the Big Ten for the 2nd year now. Deshaun Foster kind of struggled, though, with his first year as UCLA's head coach. Bruins finished with a 5-7 record overall, snapping a 3-year streak with at least 8 wins under Chip Kelly. Both the offense and the defense really shouldered the blame because they were both 90th or worse in EPA per play. There is some optimism, though, for the offense because UCLA brought in Tennessee quarterback Nico Iamaleava in one of the most publicized transfers in history. All the off-field drama aside, we consider him at PFF to be one of the 10 best quarterbacks in the country heading into 2025. He's one of the most physically gifted quarterbacks in America as well. But the defense still has plenty of concerns. It wasn't a great unit last year, and they lost so many key players and really failed to bring in any to get excited about in the portal. But Dalton, like I said before, Nico Iamaleava, in our opinion, is probably a top 10 quarterback in America.
Yeah, so if you're looking for hope, you always look to the quarterback spot. And if you're bringing in a guy like Nico Iamaleava, you're looking at a guy who broke through in the second half of last year, got Tennessee to the playoff. He went through his struggles early in the season, even had a concussion early in the year that affected him too. But I think you're talking about a guy with a boatload of talent. Right? So at least if you're a UCLA fan, you sit here and you go, well, we have the quarterback. And the quarterback, in theory, if he's that good, makes everybody around him better. And with his arm talent especially, creates just explosive plays left and right. He's got top 5 arm in the country. Might be number 1, honestly.
Yeah.
When you him, Sellers, Lagway, I know there's some guys with some cannons. But you talk about trying to create explosive plays, that's what you're going to try to do with Nico.
Is he the best since Josh Rosen? DTR's up there. I put him over DTR.
DTR, he's probably more talented than DTR. But I mean, DTR was really productive for them, for sure. You could argue he's the best they've had since Rosen. Yeah,
I would probably say that. Yeah, he's a great quarterback. I like Nico a lot. I know he got a lot of hate last year at Tennessee, and yes, he did miss some throws last year, but he's so physically talented and still had a top 20 passing grade in college football last year at Tennessee too. He has a lot of talent, and that's really why UCLA should have some hope going into next year. Now, the weakness is a defense that really doesn't have any true difference makers on that team right now. They struggled last year, and they lost 8 of their 10 most valuable defensive players, according to our wins above average metric. They made a lot of additions through the transfer portal, but none of them were really that much of a difference maker at the previous schools either. So I'm a little worried with this UCLA defense right now.
Yeah. The more we were looking into that, that's some worry. And
I will say it was hard finding a defensive player spotlight for them.
This is a tough one. And in the Big Ten, if you don't have defense, this is a unit that if they're somehow some sort of elite unit this year, we might be a little surprised. And you got to think about some of the guys they lost in the draft, right? Oladejo was their best edge player. Schlesinger at linebacker, Jay Toya on the inside. This defensive line especially, I'm a bit worried about.
With those guys, they were still outside the top 90 in e-paper play.
Yeah.
So I'm worried.
Their defensive line was 122nd in PFF grade last year. Yeah. And I'm not sure that they got any better. I don't think they did. Yeah. So I mean that's the part where you go, if Nico and maybe even Javian Thomas in the backfield can really give them a jolt offensively and they win high scoring games, cool. But I'm with you. I'm worried on this defense.
So tell me more about the ray of hope in that program right now. That is Nico Iamaleava.
Okay, so let's start with just the scouting kind of part of it. 6'6", absolute cannon for an arm, maybe the strongest arm in the country. He's got something close to probably 80-yard range, even in pads.
It's like Herbert-type tools.
Yeah, it really is. He's got tools for days. He's a good athlete. He can run. He was really good in Tennessee's play-action concepts last year. Second-best play-action passing grade in the SEC. And as the year went on, you could start to see him developing in that intermediate range, deep slants, skinny posts, in routes, things like that, where you go, man, the arm really plays up and the ball just gets where it needs to be. I think the big question we're going to have with Iamaleava is close to 58% of his dropbacks last year were in play action, right? RPO, Josh Heupel, that sort of offense. They're not going to run that sort of. It's going to be a little more of a traditional offense, more of a pro-style offense at UCLA. Can he make the adjustment to make a lot of throws underneath, especially that he just wasn't asked to make at Tennessee? It's a completely different world when you're talking about going from Josh Heupel's offense to something more traditional. So I think that's really the question, is that the tools absolutely are there. Last year in a clean pocket, 90.5 passing grade. So when he's back there and he can let it rip downfield, clean in the pocket, that's great, but can he do it in a different offense that doesn't make it so easy to do so? I think that's really one of the biggest mysteries is that it's not his talent that we question physically. It's just can he do it in this system that is not going to run play action 58% of the time?
Yeah, it's a way different offense, more of a pro-style offense, which should maybe help his NFL evaluation, but he doesn't have as much talent around him as he did at Tennessee, so that might hurt him too. It's just a weird evaluation for Nico going from Tennessee to UCLA next year. We'll see what happens, though, because he's immensely talented and could be one of the top quarterbacks in the draft if he shows some really good signs in a pro-style scheme, because that was the one thing at Tennessee where it was like not really playing a pro-style offense with the Volunteers. Now at the UCLA, maybe his NFL evaluation is aided by that fact. One guy who should help him out in that offense is his offensive tackle in Garrett DeGiorgio, who was one of the better all-around tackles in the Big Ten last year. Their right tackle, one of 8 in the Big Ten, who had 74-plus grades, both as a pass blocker and as a run blocker. 75.5 run blocking grade in particular was 7th among all Big Ten tackles last year. He's a very good athlete for the position, and he's entering his 4th year as UCLA starting right tackle. So a very experienced player at right tackle and one of the better right tackles in the Big Ten.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think if you're going to have a team like this and Deshaun Foster is going to want to build a team in the trenches, that's what you're looking at as the offensive line at right tackle there and the defensive line, right? He's trying to bring in some transfers this year. A guy like Nico Davlier from Arkansas, the edge defender, who, look, a lot of really well-taught defensive linemen been coming out of Arkansas lately. Davlier, 71 PFF grade last season, 70.7 as a pass rusher, 69.9 in run defense, kind of rotated in with Landon Jackson and those other guys off the edge at Arkansas. 270 pounds, solid spin move, good power in the run game. You need more players like that, right, to emerge. And I think the most concerning unit for me is the defensive line. If Davlier can come over from Arkansas and take another step forward, then you're talking about UCLA maybe getting a little bit better, at least up front on defense.
Yeah, I like Davlier. I think he's got, who's a solid player for Arkansas last year. But yeah, there is some issues at UCLA defense right now. Dalton, the bottom line for this UCLA team, over-under is 5.5 for their win total right now. Will they go over or under? Basically, will they make a bowl game with Nico Imaliava?
This is hard.
I'm taking the under.
It's hard, and their schedule is pretty brutal.
It's the 5th hardest in the country.
The schedule's hard. It's the defense. And here's the thing. Logic tells you that if you have a quarterback as good as Nico, you shouldn't miss a bowl game, right? This defense, and when I think about the D-line specifically, right, they're playing Utah week 1. They're playing Penn State. They're playing Indiana, who wants to run it. Ohio State, I know we don't love their offensive line, but they can get after it, right? Even a team like a USC who really knows how to manipulate a defense. Michigan State's really physical up front. It's just they're playing a lot of teams, even UNLV, that want to run the football. And I'm so worried about this UCLA D-line and this front 7 with the pieces they lost and I don't think they really replaced all that well, especially the 3 NFL pieces, obviously, when you have Oladejo and Toy on the D-line and then Schlesinger at linebacker. That's where I'm worried. I'm worried about them making enough stops and stopping the run. I think I'm going to go under also. It's also Nico adjusting to a new system with, you mentioned, not as much talent around. This is tough. Because I think, could he carry them to a bowl game? Maybe, but he's going to have to carry them. I'm worried about this defense.
I actually misspoke. It's the 2nd hardest schedule in the country according to Power Rankings. So, yeah, it's a brutal schedule, and I'm so worried about that defense next year.
There are 2 out-of-conference games to start, Utah and then at UNLV.
Yeah.
Even if we were, I don't know if we'll preview UCLA, UNLV, but I don't know who I'd pick in that game right now.
It's tough, man. It's tough. I think they're going to go under 2. Even with a top 10 quarterback in the country, Nico Imaliava, that's usually enough to drag a roster to a bowl game. But with that schedule, with that defense, with that supporting cast offensively, I just have a lot of questions right now. I'm picking them to go below 500 again in 2025. So that wraps up our preview for UCLA. Only a few more here on this desk right now. Up next is their crosstown arch rival in the USC Trojans. And Lincoln Riley has gotten progressively worse as USC's head coach over his tenure there. They start off hot in 2022 with an 11-3 record, and they had a Heisman Trophy winner in Caleb Williams. Even with Caleb Williams back in 2023, they went just 8-5, and then this past year they went 7-6 in their first year as a member of the Big Ten. Their normally elite offense looked a little stale in 2024. They're only 31st in EPA per play. That was actually the first time a Lincoln Riley coached offense was outside of the top 15 in EPA per play since he became Oklahoma's offensive coordinator in 2015. It has been a very long time since Lincoln Riley had not had a top 15 offense in the country, basically a decade until this past year. They could bounce back, though, in 2025, thanks to the return of an exciting quarterback in Jaden Maiava and Dalton, an impressive group of skill position players.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's Lincoln Riley's bread and butter, right? Is quarterback and weapons and high potent offenses, right? In the passing game, right? You're talking about guys like Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane on the outside who are really good football players. You're talking about Jaden Maiava, who's got a lot of starting experience and played reasonably well for him. He can really sling the ball downfield and work outside the pocket, right, when he's not turning the ball over. So I think the usual thing that makes any Lincoln Riley team a threat is a dangerous passing game. I think that's going to have to be the idea again here in 2025.
I am worried about the trenches for USC right now, and that's kind of been a theme with Lincoln Riley coach teams. Honestly, their passing game could have some issues next year if their offensive line does not have serious improvement, because last year the Trojans were 120th in pass blocking grade and 83rd in run blocking grade. They also only brought back 2 starting offensive linemen from last year, and both incoming transfers that are projected to start, and DJ Wingfield and Gianri Reed, had sub-70 PFF grades last year. Defensively, they were 90th in run defense grade, 89th in pass rush grade, and they only brought back 2 of the 7 front 7 defenders who played 300 snaps for them last year. So offensive line and defensive line, I have serious concerns with USC right now.
Agreed. I think actually for me it might be the O-line more so, because I think D'Anton Lynn actually did a decent job of at least somewhat improving this unit last year, because the year before 2023 they were just it was not good at all in 2023, and I think he at least made him look a bit more respectable last year. I think the D-line is still a concern. Now you lose Bear Alexander on the inside. He's gone to Oregon, and you just try to figure out, okay, who's the number one pass rusher here, I think, especially for USC. But the offensive line is more concerning to me. That part feels like it's eroded over the last couple of years, and you could see it in certain games. I think obviously everyone struggled to pass protect against Michigan, but there were certain games last year where it just felt like they were getting beat up badly in the trenches, both in the run and in pass protection in particular. It was rough. So I think if they can improve on the offensive line, they could have a really explosive offense, but they're going to have to get rid of the ball quickly, I think, against these. And that was a big question with all these teams that came over from the Pac-12. Which of you are going to be able to keep up in the trenches, right? Oregon was able to do it, but you look at USC and you get the next team in Washington that we're going to go over too. Those are the 2 teams that really struggled on the O-line. You can't struggle in the trenches in the Big Ten, not against all these cold weather teams.
Tell me more about the quarterback, Jaden Maiava, who took over for Miller Moss, who was benched last year. And you and I were both big fans of Miller Moss, but Jaden Maiava came in. And he actually looked pretty impressive, honestly, when he came in.
He did. He's a gunslinger. He's going to take his chances. He's going to take his chances downfield into tight windows. You saw against Notre Dame, especially at a really high grade, even despite throwing 2 pick sixes in the fourth quarter, because I believe he made 6 big-time throws in that game, and 19% of his passes last year were deep balls beyond 20 yards. He did it at UNLV. He did it last year in a handful of starts at USC. He's going to absolutely let it fly. 5% big-time throw rate over the last 2 seasons. It's in a similar spot as like Shedeur Sanders, Tyler Shuck. Like, he can make the throws, especially deep downfield. The question is going to be, can he reel it in a little bit? Because over the last 2 years, 5.4% turnover-worthy play rate. That is the highest of any passer with at least 500 dropbacks in the last 2 years.
Wow.
So you're talking about, when I say gunslinger, Jaden Maiava is absolutely it, and he has to reel it in, right? And this offense is designed to not turn the football over. There's a lot of safe throws in it, screens, RPOs, things like that. But he's got to understand, look, ball security is everything. Maxey's made 15 starts in his career. He's got multiple turnover-worthy plays in 11 of them.
Wow.
You just can't have it, right? So, I mean, look, he can do a lot of the high-end things, right? When you watch him play, he had the best performance other than Will Howard in the title game. He had the best performance of any quarterback against Notre Dame last season, right, in that great coverage unit. The high end is in there. The low end is also certainly in there. He's a bit of a roller coaster.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of superstar quarterbacks with Lincoln Riley, who, of course, are, sometimes big game hunters, like Caleb Williams there, Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray. Jalen Hurts is a great quarterback for Lincoln Riley, too. So he's got a lot of great quarterbacks in his career at Oklahoma, and multiple number 1 overall picks. In fact, 3 of them number 1 overall picks, and multiple Heisman Trophy winners, 3 Heisman Trophy winners, and Jalen Hurts won a Super Bowl this past year. So, yeah, a lot of great quarterbacks with Lincoln Riley, and Jaden Maiava hopes to be joining that list very soon. Offensive player spotlight guy who helped out a lot for Jayden Maiava is Mekhi Lemon, who was really efficient in his sophomore year for the Trojans. Averaged over 3 yards per route run, third among all returning receivers in the Power 4. The only two who had more were Jeremiah Smith and Jordan Tyson, who are two of the three best receivers in the country, in our opinion. Lemon is also the second most valuable returning receiver in college football, according to PFF's wins above average metric. He had kind of a slow start to the season, but really turned it on down the stretch. He had the 11th most receiving yards in the country from week 7 on, with 682 in that stretch. And right now, Dalton, he's the number 1 wide receiver prospect in the 2026 NFL draft, according to our lead draft analyst, Trevor Sikkema, too. So we could be talking about a potential first-round receiver in the NFL draft, too.
It's a good guy to have as a fan right there, huh?
Yeah.
You get Trevor Sikkema in your corner, then you start talking right there. But, I mean, it's the – you know what it is? It's the usual super productive slot receiver that Lincoln Riley always has, right? You think about CeeDee Lamb, Jordan Addison.
Yep.
Taj Washington the year before, and now you've got Mekhi Lemon. He's going to be the focal point. I know there's some people out there that absolutely love Jacoby Lane too, right? And he's super talented as well. But Mekhi Lemon is going to be the focal point from the slot who gets the highest volume of targets. So look, it's a dangerous receiving core. Again, it's always going to be a dangerous passing game with Lincoln Riley and this team. Lemon's really good. He's a darn smooth route runner, isn't he? I mean, you talk about a separator, especially over the middle of the field. He's going to have a big time year as long as, again, if they can pass protect and the chain of command there works from O-line to quarterback to receiver at that point, then you're talking about, okay, yeah, Lemon's in for a big year.
Big fan of him, and also a big fan of defensive back safety Kamari Ramsey, too.
Absolutely. One of the players that came over with D'Anton Lynn, the defensive coordinator from UCLA, and really I would say the key player to that effort, right? And you talk about an 88.1 coverage grade last year, 12th best among all safeties. He was really good at UCLA as a two-way player. Had a little bit of a drop-off in run defense last year. Again, that could improve a little bit. I think more so than a lack of aggression. There's just sometimes takes a funny angle to the ball in run defense. He can take some weird angles, but Kamari Ramsey's really good. He's another guy who's an NFL prospect. I think D'Anton Lynn, he's really built this defense. They got a really good transfer corner in DJ Harvey as well from San Jose State. They're building this defense, I think, from the back end in. So we do have questions in the trenches, but on both sides of the ball, on the perimeter especially, and even Kamari Ramsey at safety, obviously, got really good athletes on this team. And that's really one of the big advantages, is that USC is going to be one of the most athletic teams in the Big Ten. Just a matter of if the trenches can catch up to that.
Definitely. All right, Dalton, the bottom line for this team is the win total set at 7.5 right now. What's the bottom line for USC, and will they go over or under 7.5?
I want to say they're going to go over. I know they've disappointed the last couple of years because it was 7 wins the year before, and then they went 6-6 last year. But I want to say they can go over. The defense, I think, could take another step. Lynn's a really darn good coach.
Yes.
Because even, it might not show in a lot of the numbers. They were still below average. But the defense was a pretty solid step better than it was in 2023.
Oh, much better.
And if they take another step towards closer, let's say they go from, 80th or 90th in grading to maybe in the top 60, that's another solid step. This offense, as long as Maiava doesn't turn the ball over and put the ball in danger too much, this should still be solid. I think if they don't get to 8 wins, there's going to be a lot of noise out there in LA. Mm-hmm. I'm going to take them. I think they could get into that 8-9 win range. They've got some tough games. Obviously the Notre Dame game is a thing, and that's at Notre Dame this year. But I think there's a good amount of winnable games on here. I think 8-4 needs to be. That's a realistic goal for USC, and if they don't hit that, we might be talking about them a lot towards the end of the season for all the wrong reasons.
I know Lincoln Riley's contract makes it pretty hard for him to be like, I know there's a lot of money in that program too, but I think he's going to be there for a long term. But yeah, there's going to be some noise if they don't go away.
And I believe they've had a lot of big recruiting wins lately.
A lot.
So
they've been recruiting really well.
I mean, maybe there's more of a long-term vision here, but I do think it would really help. After a 7-5 with Caleb Williams and a 6-6 last year, it would really help them to have a better season. But I think they can I think they could hit that 8-win mark.
I think, they have the quarterback, the skill position players, and the secondary have a bounce back year. Just got to get better in the trenches, offensive line and defensive line. But I think Jayden Maiava is going to take a next step as a quarterback in his first really real year as a starter for Lincoln Riley. So I'm excited to see what he can do. I'll take the over too for them on 7.5. All right, next up is another new Big Ten school from last year. That is the Washington Huskies right now. Obviously, Washington made it all the way to the national title game in 2023. but regression was expected in 2024. After all, they lost 3 first-round picks from that offense in Michael Penix Jr., Rome Odunze, and Troy Fautanu, and head coach Kalen DeBoer left to take over the vacated Alabama job. Jedd Fisch took over for Kalen DeBoer, and he coached Washington to a 6-7 record this past season. There's some optimism for improvement, though, in 2025, Dalton, because they have 3 potential superstars on offense in DeMond Williams Jr. at quarterback, in running back Jonah Coleman, and in wide receiver Denzel Boston.
If they can block enough, just enough on that offensive line, this could be an extremely fun offense because Williams – we'll get more into Williams, but he was one of the most intriguing quarterbacks I've watched this offseason. Jonah Coleman's a stud. You talk about the physicality and what he can bring in the run game and the attitude he brings. And then Denzel Boston, to me, has got a lot of Jaden Higgins in him. He's got the big body. He's got solid speed, but he's a really good route runner with great hands. I think you're talking about a skill group, especially if Williams shows even more of what he did last year. And Jedd Fisch sure knows how to coach quarterbacks. This becomes one of the most interesting offenses in this conference, but they just need to block enough, don't they?
Yeah, that offensive line has got to get a lot better. That offensive line was a major issue last year. 50.9 offensive line grade in 2024, the second worst in the Power 4, second worst pass blocking grade in the Power 4, and they were 106th in the country in run blocking grade 2. They also lost 3 starters from their offensive line from last year, and neither of the incoming transfers had a 70 PFF grade last year too. So it was a great offensive line in 2023, bigger than why they made it all the way to the national title game that year. 2024, it became one of the worst in the country, and it doesn't look like it'll get too much better this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's something they're going to have to either just get better and develop on the inside, or they're going to have to work around it. The one thing I do like, and I think with the whole offseason under his belt, is that DeMond Williams under Jedd Fisch. Jedd Fisch, and we saw this with Noah Fifita at Arizona, really good at getting his quarterbacks to throw on time. It's why he brought in Will Howard as a veteran transfer last year before Williams took the job at the end of the year. But Fisch wants his guys to throw the ball on time. He wants to help his offensive line when it comes to not having to pass protect for 4.5 seconds. So I think that is a big advantage, having Jedd Fisch as their head coach and calling plays, but it definitely has to get better up front in order to take another step of competing at the top of the conference.
Tell me more about DeMond Williams, though, Dalton. True freshman last year, and I believe, actually, if you make the snap count minimum, like 250 snaps, he was easily the highest graded true freshman quarterback last year with over an 80 PFF grade.
I'll tell you what, he's an athlete. He's got a high ceiling. Yeah. And I think when you're talking about the only little bit of time that he played last year, he had to start against Oregon, over an 80 PFF grade. He had to start against Louisville, solid team, over an 80 PFF grade. And I think what you look at is 2 things. One, a dynamic athlete. 63 carries on the ground. 21 forced missed tackles, okay? 105 pass attempts, 6.3% big-time throw rate. You drop that minimum down to that 100, highest big-time throw rate in the Big Ten. You're talking about a guy who's got a lot of tools. He's a little bit undersized, not quite Kyler Murray size, a little bigger than that, but he's got a similar skill set where you go, man, he can make big throws down the field. He's not afraid to improvise on the outside. He's a dangerous runner. DeMond Williams is one of the most intriguing quarterbacks, I think, that I watched this offseason. And if he's exactly what I think about with what Jedd Fisch did with Noah Fifita, is if you can get him to throw on time more often and then allow him to not rely on the playmaking ability so much, this is a dangerous football player. Now, the weaknesses, 157 dropbacks. He's holding the football too long. 22 sacks. He's getting sacked on 1 out of every 7 dropbacks last year. Can't have it. A lot of that is on him. Now, the offensive line is not good either, but he's holding the ball too long. He's got to get rid of it. 3.2 second average time to throw. So he's undersized. I'd like to see him take a few less hits. There's sometimes when he's trying to squeeze every yard out of every run, and at 5'11 and 190, I don't need you taking every hit in a Big Ten schedule, but I'm telling you, this is a fun player, because if Fisch can get him to run the fundamental parts of the offense like he got with Fifita 2 years ago when Noah Fifita was really good in Arizona in 2023, This is going to be fun to watch, because he's going to be a big part of the running game too, and that opening up for Coleman. Williams as a read option threat.
Oh yeah.
Whew, he's as an athlete, he's a problem.
Some of those plays in the Sun Bowl against Louisville were unreal. What he did in that game.
He is outside the pocket and out on the move and in the run game. He's a serious issue. I think he just needs to bring the time to throw down a bit. But again, him having Jedd Fisch as his coach is going to be a huge advantage for his development.
Shout out our guy, Mitch Kaiser, huge fan of Damon Williams Jr.
Yeah, he's a huge fan. He thinks he's the next Kyler.
And, I mean, listen, he looked great last year. And, we talk a lot about Dylan Raiola and Julian Sayin in this episode and DJ Lagman last episode. Do not forget about Damon Williams Jr. in that true freshman quarterback class, now true sophomores going into next year. I think Damon Williams Jr. could be with them, if not better than them, in terms of who the best quarterbacks in college football in that class. So big fan of him and also a huge fan of Jonah Coleman, the star running back for Washington right now. He has been one of college football's best runners since he arrived on the scene 3 years ago in college football. Across his 2 years at Arizona and 1 with Washington, 95.4 career PFF rushing grade, tying for 5th among all running backs in the country over the last 3 years. No other returning running back is in the top 15 of that grading. So incredible player, bowling ball at 5'9", 229 pounds, quicker feet than you'd expect for someone that size too. Averaged 4.6 yards after contact per attempt over the last 2 years, 3rd among all running backs in the country, 35% forced missed tackle rate over the last 2 years, tied for 2nd among Power 4 running backs. Pretty good receiver, too. He has 509 yards after the catch since 2023, 15th among Power 4 running backs in that span. You mentioned before, Dalton, he and Damon Williams Jr. as a read option in that offense should be a lot of fun with maybe a first-round receiver, too, and Denzel Boston. If that offensive line can hold up, this offense can be incredibly, incredibly dangerous next year.
I've mentioned already the advantage of having Fish running your offense, but there's also an advantage to having, I've talked about this on the NFL show with Trevor about when you watch Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen and Jaden Daniels, when you have a quarterback that is that mobile and is that much of an option threat, it's one less guy you have to block in an offense. And that's the difference between this team even early last year with Will Rogers as the quarterback. He was a non-threat as a runner. Now you're making people freeze. You're making the defense space out a little bit. You're making linebackers widen out a little bit. So the power of Coleman between the tackles and the speed of Williams out on the edge, that could be a really dangerous dynamic. Even if they're just a mediocre team blocking up front, that option threat with the two of them is going to be fantastic to watch.
And Dawn, one guy who had kind of a down year in 2024 without Jedd Fisch as the head coach, but with Jedd Fisch in 2023, we thought this guy could be a first-round pick at cornerback, is Tacario Davis.
Yeah, you look at Tacario Davis and you watch a 2023 tape, 6'4", incredibly long arms. I mean, the only comp you can come up with really is Tariq Woolen, right? Who's a star, obviously, in the NFL. And everything kind of dropped off the table last year. Now everything dropped off the table last year when Fish left Arizona on the whole. They lost Coleman. They lost Michael Wiley. They lost everything except for Noah Fafita and Tedero McMillan and Tacario Davis. And Davis, I'll be honest, watching his tape again, I thought maybe after the first few games, to me it felt like he looked disinterested. Like he knew what was going on in that program, and maybe he knew he was going to leave, and maybe knew he was going to leave and go to Jedd Fisch.
Remember, he entered the portal last year and stayed at Arizona.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe
I think he's incredibly talented.
Yeah.
When you watch a 2023 tape, you go, that's a top 5-6 corner in the country, and he's a freak at 6'4", right? I thought his tape last year. You obviously don't want to. You want to see guys compete. Yeah. Right, every week. But I thought he looked disinterested. I thought it was that maybe that part of it is when he was pondering leaving.
Yeah, and stayed.
If maybe he
had
was
some remorse
maybe a little bit. So get him back with Jedd Fisch, right? Get him. Ryan Walters now coming in as the defensive coordinator, and we know what Purdue did, running all that man coverage, which should be right up Davis's alley. I think there could be a bounce back here for Tacario Davis because Ryan Walters is a DC, because they're going to get aggressive on the back end. And if you're not using Tacario Davis in press man coverage, I'm not really sure what you're doing because he's a 6'4" freak who can do that. I'm gonna let the 24 tape go and go the optimistic route and go, I think he's in a place now where he wants to be.
And if he does, that's a first-round pick in 2026.
It very well could be. I mean, he's a freak.
Yeah.
I mean, you just don't get guys. It's him. It's Tariq Woolen. Siobhan Revel was close, but not quite this big. I mean, he's 6'4", and he can legitimately impress. Man, 2 years ago, you weren't getting off him. He was awesome. So I think I'm gonna go the optimist route and go, okay, he's back with his old head coach. We're gonna be a little bit better with Tacario Davis in 2025.
Over/under is set at 7.5 for Washington right now. Will they go over or under that win total, Dawn, in 2025?
Oof.
I'm gonna go over. I like the potential that they have. I think Damon Williams Jr. is a rising star at quarterback. Jonah Coleman is one of the best running backs in America. Denzel Boston could be a first-round pick at wide receiver. The O-line has major holes, yes, but there's a lot of talent in that offense. I think Takara Davis could bounce back defensively too. That schedule is manageable. I see 4 games. I'm like, okay, they probably should lose that game, but other than that, I think they probably will be favored in every other game. I think 7.5. I'll just take the over and say probably an 8-4 year for the Washington Huskies.
They'll be looking for revenge in the Apple Cup for sure. If they get that 3-0,
you got Ohio State,
maybe Maryland, Purdue, UCLA. I would take them over UCLA right now, but I mean, yeah, I think you can take an over and take. Is it 7.5 or 8?
7.5.
Doesn't leave you a whole lot of room for error either.
No.
But they're getting a lot of. If
it was 8.5, I'll take the under.
They're getting almost all their hard games at home too. Ohio State coming in, Illinois coming in.
Yep.
Oregon at home, even though Oregon, that's tough. But I mean, you never know. You play these home games, and that's a fun environment when they borderline trenches. It's all about Damon Williams, really, because I do think he can quietly be one of the most dangerous quarterbacks in the conference. I'll take the over. They got talent.
Yeah,
they got talent offensively. It's about the trenches, but they have a lot of their tough games at home. I'm not saying they'll beat Ohio State or Oregon, but I think Damon Williams and the athleticism intrigues me the most. I might ride with you with somewhere. Maybe you hit that 8-4 mark.
Yep, I'm going over too. Explosive offense, nice pieces in the secondary. Got to get better than trenches on both sides of the ball, but I think over 7.5. So I'm taking for Washington right now. All right, final one, finally here in this lengthy Big Ten preview.
18 of 18.
18 of 18 is the Wisconsin Badgers right now. Luke Fickell entered Wisconsin with a lot of hype. He led Cincinnati to the college football playoff, the first ever Group of 5 school to make it that far. However, he has yet to find his footing as Wisconsin's head coach with a 13-13 record through 2 years so far. That included a 5-7 record this past year, the first time that Wisconsin missed a bowl game since 2001. Over 2 decades since Wisconsin missed a bowl game, and it happened this past year in 2024. Kind of an uphill battle in 2025. They face the hardest schedule in the country, according to PFF's power rankings. They have a very good secondary and a very good offensive line are the strengths of the team, but there are still questions about the rest of the defense in addition to where will the offense come from. But Dalton, that secondary for Wisconsin should be once again a really strong unit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at just some of the players that they have. You've got Preston Zachman, you've got Ricardo Hallman, you've got it's just that's the part where the Luke Fickell blueprint is on it, where you go, okay, if you're gonna beat Wisconsin, you're gonna have to beat them up front. You're going to have to beat them physically, which is still not an easy thing to do, right? I mean, you look at a team that they have the big players on the offensive and defensive lines. It's still Big Ten football, right? But you got to beat them running the ball. They just, I think that's the biggest thing is, especially with Hallman and Zachman back there, they don't give up big plays. Hallman's the ball hawk. Zachman's a really good tackler who doesn't allow things to get behind him. So I think when you're looking at this defense, you're going, okay, just like you had at Cincinnati back in the day with Sauce Gardner and Kobe Bryant and those guys, you go, okay, they're not going to give up big plays. You got to beat them. If you're going to beat them, you got to beat them slow and steady. But it's been something teams have been able to do lately, especially with their lack of offense.
Yeah, 20th best coverage grade in the Power 4 last year. Should be, again, a really good unit in 2025. The weakness, though, is up front in the front 7 of that defense right now. Only 2 players in Wisconsin's front 7 had 70-plus PFF grades in 2024. Both of them are no longer with the program. They did add a few projected starters in the transfer portal, and they'll need those players to step up in order to improve the team's run defense, which is 120th in PFF grade last year, and pass rush, which was 67th in the country last year too. So I'm a little worried about that front 7 for Wisconsin right now.
Yeah, I mean that's the part is against a lot of these teams, especially in that kind of in that old Big Ten West division, right? When you talk about the Minnesotas and Iowas of the world, that they want to run the football, and if you're not able to stop the run, even when you're playing, say, Penn State or Michigan, whoever head to head, you're talking about a team that needs to be more physical. And it's only odd because we're so used to Wisconsin being the more physical team on the field all the time, right? I mean, that's just the thing. But their secondary, at least if you're not giving up explosive plays, you give your front 7 a chance to operate and you know what type of game you're playing.
All right, Dalton, tell me more about the transfer quarterback coming in Billy Edwards Jr. from Maryland.
Yeah, Billy Edwards Jr. He's got a lot of tools. Look, if you're looking for a guy who can throw it down the field vertically and is a little bit of an athlete, I think you have a guy guy who has potential for them, right? Especially for a Wisconsin passing attack that has lacked explosiveness for the last couple of years. So I think when you're looking at Edwards, good arm. He's got a moon ball to the outside. He likes to throw the ball up the seam. And I think what you liked at Maryland last year, in part because of their poor pass protection, was he had the third fastest average time to throw in the country, and yet he found ways to attack downfield. It allowed him to beat the blitzes that everybody was throwing his way at Maryland, and he's really, I think, the deep ball, right? Just the threat of having that deep ball in this offense especially, that really is missing that a lot. If he can get a deep ball to guys like Vinny Anthony on the outside, then you've got a different kind of offense for Wisconsin here, because that's what they've been missing. They can't work the ball downfield. The one problem with Edwards is got off to a really hot start. Obviously, he had Ty Felton and Caden Prather. Really dropped off when he got into Big Ten play, right? I think it was through week 8. He had 18 big-time throws. That was a top 10 mark in the country. But when you get into Big Ten play from week 5 on, 61.4 passing grade. Can he do it against the better defenses? Can he do it in those big games and this really hard schedule that they're playing? I think that's the issue, is can he not stare down his first target and try to force passes where they shouldn't be? So I want to see him kind of take a step up against the better competition. I know he can beat the G5 teams and the teams he's supposed to beat, but I think that's going to be the idea with Edwards, is we need more explosive plays. This is the guy we went and got to do it.
Absolutely. And his star offensive tackle blocking for him is Riley Mahlman, who entered last year as our number 8 tackle in the country and is once again in the top 10 in 2025 too. Second most valuable returning Power 4 tackle over the last 2 years, according to PFF's wins above average metric. 79.6 PFF grade over those last 2 years, is tied for 34th among all tackles in the nation. And the guy tied with him at 34 is Olu Fashanu, who was a top 15 pick in the 2024 NFL draft. A good pass blocker and a good run blocker, 75-plus grades in each of those over the last 2 years too. So Wisconsin always has a really good offensive line, it feels like, and Riley Mahlman is keeping that tradition alive right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's Wisconsin. I don't know. Yeah. We could have almost skipped over that part of it, going, oh, they're going to have a pretty good offensive line. Yeah, absolutely. They're going to. They always do, especially with Mahlman in pass protection off that right side.
Who was the star defensive player in that secondary we talked about before for Wisconsin?
Look, they lost one really fundamentally sound, versatile safety in Hunter Wohler, but they've got another one coming back in Preston Zachman. And I think that's what jumps out at you when you watch him snap to snap. He can do a little bit of everything, whether it's in the box, playing a deep half, getting back in coverage. He's a really good tackler. I think it's just every snap he's very consistent, right? He doesn't make all of the flashiest plays in the world, but Preston Zachman is the exact type of player that Luke Fickell likes to have at safety. It's just fundamentally sound. He doesn't miss tackles. He does a little bit of everything. I think that's a player in the middle of your defense that really, he's a leader, right? He's a guy who's a leader back there, and you know he's going to do his job. I think he's obviously learned a lot from Hunter Wohler. He's not as big as Wohler, but he plays a very similar style to me.
So Wisconsin's over-under right now is set at 5.5, which means basically Vegas is saying either make a bowl game or don't for Wisconsin next year. I'm trying to look at the last time they missed multiple bowl games in a row. That was back in 1991 and 1992 was the last time they missed 2 bowl games in a row. Will that happen in 2025, Dalton, as they face, keep in mind, the hardest schedule in the country according to our power rankings?
Yeah, I think I'm in on the under. I don't know what I can trust on this offense. Because even, their best receiver and Will Pauling left. I think Tawi Walker was their leading rusher last year, and he left and went to Cincinnati. They have another new quarterback who wasn't great last year and is now playing on a team. Look, last year, Billy Edwards had Ty Felton and Caden Prather at Maryland. To me, both of those guys are better than anything that Wisconsin has currently at receiver. Then you talk about, there's an out-of-conference game. They got to go down to Alabama. That's going to be tough. I just offensively, their defense will be solid. Luke Fickell's defenses are always solid. But offensively, I just don't know what can I rely on other than the offensive line being pretty solid, which is always a thing. But the skill players, it just seems like they're not fixing this problem.
Yeah.
They lost their leading rusher. I think they lost their leading receiver, passing. I mean, that's where I'm at, and especially against that schedule with all these good defenses, I think I'm in on the under again for Wisconsin.
I'm taking the under, too. I mean, look at that schedule right now. You're at Alabama. You got Oregon at Oregon. You got Ohio State. You got Illinois. You're at Indiana. You're at Michigan. Just a lot of games that I don't think Wisconsin should be winning. And then there's a couple other toss-ups, too, like Washington at home, too. You're at Minnesota. You're hosting Iowa, too. A lot of games I think Wisconsin could and should lose next year. I'm taking the under. I know it's kind of crazy to say Wisconsin missed 2 straight bowl games, but that it's the hardest schedule in the country. And like Dalton said, there's a lot of question marks offensively and defensively right now. I'm taking the under and saying Wisconsin's probably going to go around 4-8 or 5-7 next year, and then some pressure starting to mount on Luke Fickell in that program. That happens.
The defense will keep them in it every week. They will, but I for their offense to succeed, I mean, they just basically, to me, they're basically just hoping that Billy Edwards becomes a star.
Yeah,
and I don't have a ton of faith in that.
Yeah. Well, that wraps up our Big Ten preview, going over all 18 Big Ten teams. Of course, we've got 2 more previews coming your way next week on Monday with the Big 12, going over all 16 teams there. Then the ACC the week after that, all 17 teams there. And, of course, Notre Dame will be getting their own preview as well in addition to that. But halfway done basically now with all our previews with the SEC and Big Ten out of the way. Next week's the Big 12, then the ACC and Notre Dame, of course. And then more college football content in the offseason before we get into the 2025 season. Make sure you guys like and subscribe to the channel. Appreciate you guys getting us to 20,000 very recently. Love all you guys for doing that. For our producers back there and Eli and Tyler, for Dalton Washman, I'm Max Chadwick. We'll see you guys next Monday with our full preview of the Big 12 Conference, every single team.